Good morning. Let Mr. Pugsley find his seat.
Morning, Stephen. How are you? I'll keep talking to you.
Morning, Stephen. How are you? I don't know. Quite rude, I thought. Right, he caught me doing strange things in Marks and Spencer on Saturday. Welcome to December's meeting. I can't believe we're in December. Of the Exmoor National Park Authority. Apologies for absence. I've got Lee Baker, John Petrinos, and Evelyn Stacey. Are there any more, Carol? Item 2, declarations of interest. I'm going to start on this one on item.
I suppose, in some ways, I should declare an interest, shouldn't I? It's non-financial, I would hope, anyway. But on the White Table Eagle one, I am a sheep farmer, aren't I? And bearing in mind one or two of the comments are made to me, I should declare an interest there.
Thank you. I think item 9, considering risk management, although it's only a personal interest. My son works at Devon Audit Partnership, who will have come up with what we need to say. Jeremy.
Yeah.
Mandy.
No, sorry.
Francis, no. Stephen, no. That's it. Chairperson's announcements. I do have a couple. So you will have noticed this on your way in, hopefully, when you signed in. The relocation of the Dulverton Visitor Centre, National Park Centre. I'm now in huge amounts of trouble. Obviously, it's complete, and we had a soft launch at the weekend for Dunster. Not Dunster. Oh my God! Should I go home? We're in Dulverton. Okay. Well, at least it was on Exmoor. Could have been anywhere, couldn't it? Where it was all very positive. So that was rather good. And yeah, I hope if you didn't come in the front door, you have a little chance to have a look. I was very impressed. Love it all opened up and looks very nice, and there's a lovely tree as well. Member training and development. This won't be so popular. The Standards Committee have been working on a revised member training and development programme. And early next year, we've got some important elements that we all need to be trained in. So there'll be some planning sessions that Carol will advise us on. Is that correct? Thank you. And the Exmoor Forum is on Friday, which I know is the highlight of your calendars. And Friday at 1:30 at Moorland Hall, Wedden Cross. Correct location, I've just confirmed by looking at it, in case I sent you somewhere else on Exmoor. I do believe there might be a cup of tea. I'm sure there will be. That's lovely, thank you. So it's worth coming for the cup of tea. Right, moving on to item 4, minutes of the last meeting. Can I have a proposer and a seconder, please? Thanks, Jeremy. Somebody to second? Thanks, Mike. All those in favour? And then, as usual, I will go through as we do. So, page 1, page 2, page 3. Mr. Bray. Oh, I need to turn it on the side properly.
Yes. I nearly dropped an email on the point. It's the second from bottom paragraph, and it's regarding paragraph 2.5 on the. If you see the second from bottom paragraph.
Yes.
And it was a clarification point of a comment which I didn't feel reflected the true position, and it's saying that for Exmoor National Park to reach net zero by 2050, it referred to a 10% increase in woodland. And it was referencing a small consulting report. The clarification nearly clarifies it, but what I want to be clear on is this report doesn't say for Exmoor to reach net zero, it's for the UK. And on top of that, it takes into account 50% more to allow for things we buy overseas. So it's quite a lot higher target. So I think that's slightly misleading. I think it's okay as is, but just slightly ambiguous as it is. I think going forward we need to be really clear on the different targets.
Thank you. So leave this as it is, because
Yes,
it's fine. But thank you for raising that point.
Yes.
Thank you. And you did in the meeting, I do recall that. Thank you. So going on to page 4. No, all happy? Thank you. So we now have public speaking, and we've got Mr. Delbridge come to join us. Welcome. So I'm going to ask him to come forward, and then, because I don't want Mr. Delbridge sat around wasting his life sat in an authority meeting, because I'm sure he's got better things to do, I'm going to propose that we bring item 13 forward, and I would like Mr. Milton to second that.
Yes.
Thank you. So can we have a vote on bringing item 13 forward, because he's going to talk to us about eagles, white-tailed eagles. All in favour? We will have a presentation first. I'm just bringing the item forward so Mr. Delbridge doesn't think he's got to sit here watching his life fade away in front of him while we go through the whole agenda. I wanted to be reassured that we're going to talk about it straight afterwards. Mr. Delbridge.
Well, thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to come and speak to you this morning. For those who don't know me, I'm Pete Delbridge. I'm a 6th generation Exmoor sheep farmer, and currently the chairman of the National Sheep Association. In that role, I spend a lot of time travelling around the UK, meeting other sheep farmers and members. And on one such visit in the summer, I met some Scottish guys, farmers from the west coast of Scotland, who are living with seagulls and have lived with them for quite some time now, as there are now about 120 breeding pairs, I believe, up there. Before meeting them, I thought my view of their introduction were that they were very much a similar problem to what we already have down here, in as much we have crows, ravens and black-backed gulls around lambing time, and they pick up the odd weekly lamb, which we can all live with. But I was told, anecdotally from first-hand experiences, that losses around lambing time amounted to some 30%. They took small hogs and small breeding ewes, and in one case a newborn calf had been taken. There was no way of protecting their livestock because they are a protected bird. They were promised a boost in rural tourism that has not materialised. I don't do social media, so it was a bit of a surprise to me that there were 2 meetings down here at Dunster and Linton that I missed out on, and from what I can gather, only one what I would call bona fide Exmoor farmer attended each meeting. I was very alarmed, and therefore would require a lot more engagement, debate and consultation before this reintroduction takes place, because from where I'm sat, sheep farmers are the only ones that look like they're going to miss out financially if something goes wrong, and we don't know what the protocols and procedure would be if something similar to the Scottish experience takes place down here. I think that is my 2 minutes.
Thank you. So fortunately we're going to go straight and have the presentation about it, and hopefully some of those points will be addressed, please. Yeah. That'd be good. Thank you. Peter, if you go and take a seat, then you can see what happens. Thank you for coming along. We don't often have members of the public, so it's lovely when we do have one. Thank you. Right, we'll go straight into item 13 then, please.
Thanks very much. So yes, I'm just going to. Sorry.
You might turn it on the side.
Can everybody hear me okay? Yeah. I'm Ali Hawkins. I'm the Senior Ecologist with the National Park Authority. And I'd just like to say it's been a real privilege over the last 3.5 years to be working closely with the Roy Dennis Wildlife Foundation. And we're delighted today to have Zoe Smith with us. We've also been working with Tim McCrill, and we're very honoured to have Roy Dennis himself, who came down, I think last year, to visit us on Exmoor, came all the way down from Scotland. So it's been 3.5 years since the first white-tailed eagle arrived, decided to visit Exmoor from the Isle of Wight release. So that release has been happening over the last 5 or 6 years. Zoe will tell you a little bit about the background to that, but also mainly about the plans for Exmoor. Since the first eagle visited us 3.5 years ago, I think it was June 2021, Zoe and other colleagues, so particularly Rich Eales and other members of the team, have been doing a lot of work doing one-to-one visits with landowners and with shoots. They've gone out, they've spent the time sitting around farm tables, chatting about the eagles. Zoe's got fantastic knowledge herself and experience from the Isle of Wight project, and I think that has been very reassuring on a one-to-one basis to have those conversations. So I think this is a really exciting opportunity for us to play a part in assisting with the expansion of white-tailed eagles, sea eagles across southern England, very much building on the work that's happened very successfully on the Isle of Wight, working with Forestry England, where there have been no cases at all of problems with livestock. I think one of the things that's really impressed me about this project is that it's based on sound science and data and monitoring. So as Zoe will explain, all the white-tailed eagles are fitted with satellite tags, which allows us to know exactly where the eagles are at any one point in time. And I think that is a really powerful tool, which Zoe will explain more about. In terms of our wider priorities, this project fits completely with our partnership plan objectives to make Exmoor richer in wildlife, and also helps us to develop and take forward our targets in the nature recovery vision. As mentioned, we've had some local events over the last couple of weeks, to which we advertised widely, and everybody was very welcome to attend those events. So we had nearly 300 people attending those events. We've also got a public opinion survey out at the moment that Zoe will explain a little bit more about. But yeah, that survey is still live, but we've had nearly 700 responses on the public opinion survey. So without saying anything more, I'm going to hand over to the expert. I'm going to hand over to Zoe Smith, who's going to give a short presentation, and then there'll be time for questions. So Zoe, over to you. Thanks.
Okay, good morning everyone, and thank you Peter for coming. I'm really pleased that you're here, and I look forward to talking to you after the meeting. We can have more of an in-depth chat. So just to recap everything, so we've been releasing white-tailed eagles as a reintroduction on the Isle of Wight since 2019 as a partnership project between the Roy Dennis Wildlife Foundation and Forestry England. And it's come to a point in the project that we know these birds will only breed within about a 60-kilometre radius of the Isle of Wight. So in order to repopulate the whole of England, we need to start doing some species restoration programmes and reinforcement projects. And that's why we've decided Exmoor is a great place, and we'd like to extend our partnership with the Exmoor National Park. And this is not a done deal. We haven't decided on this definitely, obviously. We're still in our consultation stages. So just to recap on some of the history, the white-tailed eagle, which is also interchangeably known as the sea eagle, was persecuted to extinction by humans, so removed from the landscape purely by humans in the Middle Ages. And that was because they were seen as competition for fish. The last known breeding pair in England was way back in the 1700s on Culver Cliff on the Isle of Wight. And that also helped us decide where we need to start reintroducing this bird and bringing it back to where it formerly was. We know for sure that these birds were inhabited on our island because we've got these geographical location names, and on the Exmoor coast we also have these names that correlate with the eagles. We've also got the archaeological records. So we have pure evidence these birds should be in our landscape, but they were removed. So the reason that the birds have been coming to Exmoor and the reason that we like Exmoor is because it's a brilliant landscape. It's undisturbed with those deep wooded valleys, the longest stretch of coastal woodland in the whole of England and Wales. And you've got great prey. These birds, they like carrion, they like birds, they like fish as well. So these are the main things that are attracting them and bringing them into Exmoor, and rabbits and hares as well. And since about 3.5 years ago, we've had 7 different eagles that have been to Exmoor and spent up to 7 months. So these birds have already been here. This is not a new concept. And as Ali's mentioned, all of these birds are fitted with satellite transmitters. So we have monitored their every movement since they've left the Isle of Wight. So we know exactly what kind of habitat are they choosing and what kind of prey they're feeding on. So we have a real understanding of their diet. So if you look in this map, this is every single bird that's been satellite tagged since 2019 to 2024. So you can see when they're young, they're very nomadic, and they all range extensively. We've had birds going back up to northern Scotland, we've had birds going even into Europe, and one bird went all the way to Sweden and came back again. But the darker areas represent the places that the birds have spent most of their time. So if you kind of look beyond that 60-kilometre radius of the Isle of Wight, we start to get these kind of eagle hotspots, which has that great landscape and good prey availability. So places like East Anglia, the Wash, North Norfolk, is a brilliant area for them. But if we focus on the southwest, you start to see that Exmoor is a place that these birds really favour. And if we look more in depth, this map shows you different individuals, so each colour is a different individual bird, and the places that they've been spending their time on Exmoor. So one of the first birds to visit was G405. She came here in 2021, and I think this picture's really iconic. You've got Exmoor pony, Exmoor mist, and you've got the Exmoor eagle. And lucky for us, this eagle specifically actually chose to go to Warren Farm, to Andrew Hawkins. And he actually had the bird on his land whilst it was lambing season, and absolutely no issues. It also went to his neighbour, Oliver Edwards, who's another sheep farmer. So people have actually been seeing the eagles on their land with their sheep and have experienced no issues. The latest bird to visit here, well, that eagle I forgot to mention was a really iconic bird because she's the first breeding female in England, and she now breeds in West Sussex. And she's had a chick last year, and this year she had 2 chicks. And one of her sons, this male, was the last bird to visit Exmoor. It came here in October 2024, and he's currently on Bodmin Moor at the moment. So let's have a recap on the diet of these birds. So basically, these eagles are generalist predators, so they will take whatever's most seasonally abundant. Fish is what they like to feed on. They'll also take mammals, they'll take rabbits and hares, and they'll feed on carrion because it's an easy meal, especially when they're young. About 30% of the diet when they're young is carrion. And they're also pirates. They'll steal fish from other things like gulls, cormorants, herons, and otters. Also osprey as well. So we have extensive research on the diet of these birds. As I said, every one of them is tagged, and we've got a lot of feeding observations, and we know what the birds have been feeding on. So we've had over 700 feeding observations to date, which is very high, and it's quite a high-level study within the whole of Europe. So when we look at their diet, 34% of the diet's birds. So you're taking water birds, gulls, corvids. They're also taking 30% around about fish, 23% mammals, and they'll also take mollusks and crustacean as well. If you look in that photo, the male's carrying an eel, and the pair there, they're ice fishing in Pulborough Brooks. Something else we discovered from the Isle of Wight is these birds like to take cuttlefish as well, and this hasn't come up in many other European studies, so that was quite an interesting observation. So we've now handed our data to Cardiff University, who've been looking more in depth at the information. And what we found out is carrion, it's more important when the birds are young, but as they get older, carrion becomes less important in the diet. So you can see there in the first year, carrion really important. As they get to breeding age, they're not so reliant on carrion because they've generally switched over to fish. So if you focus on the green bar in the diet there, that shows fish in the diet, and as the birds get older, so about 5th and 6th calendar year, they start breeding, they're switching to fish. And we now also have more information, not just from the young released birds, but also the breeding pair. So this breeding pair, they're both satellite tagged, and the young birds are satellite tagged as well. And we can obviously observe now the diet at the nest. So what we found is that, obviously, this is the age class of all the birds. As they get older, fish is really important in their diet. But in the breeding pair, 80% of the food delivered during April and May, which is lambing season, it is fish. And this is really important to remember. So in the ecosystem, these birds are really important because they're top of the food chain, they're an apex predator, they can help regulate mid-level predators. So things like corvids and buzzards that may be becoming higher in their population. These birds can regulate their numbers. They're also very important in wetland systems because they're feeding on fish and water birds. And we've had no conflict with livestock. So over the last 5 years, there's been absolutely no conflict. They also help with corvid control, and we see them feeding on things like rooks. You've got a male here feeding at a rookery. But we think this could be a really important opportunity for Exmoor. Exmoor's been noted as one of the least visited national parks in the whole of England. So this is a brilliant opportunity for you to boost those visitor numbers. You can bring in income through bed and breakfast, from restaurants. It's not just anyone directly, specifically working on an eagle boat tour. But there's lots of opportunities here for Exmoor. And eagle tourism in Scotland is worth between 4 to 8 million. We've also proven how popular this is because birds of Poole Harbour have a territorial pair. So then the birds are not breeding yet, but they've become a pair in Dorset at Poole Harbour. And birds of Poole Harbour have started doing boat trips. And these boat trips are so popular, they've been booked out for the whole year. And this lady is commenting on social media. She went on the boat trip and saw 5 white-tailed eagles. So we have a lot of evidence here to back this up. So on the Isle of Wight, before they started the project, obviously many people had concerns. And they did a public perception survey to ask people, not just on the Isle of Wight, but on the whole of the south coast of England, how do you feel about this project? At the time, 86% were in favour and 11% were opposed. They repeated the survey in 2022, so a few years when the birds were actually in the landscape and people were used to having the birds around. And actually the support had increased, and now 93% of people are in favour and only 3% are opposed. In Ireland, there were similar concerns. So there was a reintroduction to Ireland in the early 2000s, bringing in Norwegian chicks. The farmers were not happy about this idea. They went to the airport and protested when the chicks were being brought in. But after a few years of actually having the eagles in the landscape, they realised there's no conflict with lambs, there's no conflict with livestock. We even have eagles breeding on farms. And these farmers are now either guardians of the eagle nest or they're neutral. So on Exmoor, as we said, the last 3.5 years we've been having birds visiting. So this public engagement actually started because it started with just us going to visit people who had eagles on their land. And this included farmers, Andrew Hawkins, also shoots. Brian Mitchell had an eagle down at Philly. I went down to see the bird down there. And actually, we started to explain, and people could see these birds living in the landscape. So we've also spoken to obviously the members here. We've also spoken to the Conservation Advisory Panel, which has included the Exmoor Hill Farming Network, and they were also told about the public meetings, so they could have spread that information. We've been on the media in the last few weeks. We've been on Radio Somerset, Devon, BBC and ITV. I give extensive eagle talks, so I've been giving talks down through Devon. Well, we do national talks, but I've been focusing on Devon and Somerset and Cornwall as well. We have a live public opinion survey, which is open now, which I'll talk about more in a moment. We're also working with the Exmoor Game School, who would like to support this project, and we would work in partnership if we start this. And we obviously had our drop-in sessions. We had 91 people attending at Dunster, and we had 190 at Lynmouth, which was brilliant. So this just shows you a little snapshot of the things we were doing. I was giving informative talks. We were talking one-to-one. We had eagle expert Steve Egerton-Reid from the Isle of Wight, who's been working on this project for the last 5 years. We had my colleague Tim McCrill there as well. We had a lot of eagle activities for children, And it was a really positive day. And I think one of the most positive things was having Brian Mitchell there, who's the vice chairman of the Gamekeepers Association. We had Andrew Hawkins, a sheep farmer, and we had Oliver Edwards, who actually came to us and said he was not in favour of the project, but after hearing that information, finding out the true facts, he has completely changed his mind. And he thinks that these positives are brilliant. So here's just some of the comments on social media. You can see that Exmoor cottagers have had a guest that's seen an eagle, so this is already playing out in a really positive way. And we have a lot of support for the project and many people wanting to even volunteer and get involved. So the results of our public perception survey, which is still live, so anyone can contribute and add their responses. We've had 657 responses so far. We've had 93% of people that are in favour, 6% that are not in favour, and 1% that's neutral. So if you'd like to share that, please feel free to do that. So the key points of all of this. All of the birds that we are released from the Isle of Wight and all of the birds that we would release on Exmoor will be satellite tagged. So we'll know their every movement all of the time. We've had no predation of livestock since the Isle of Wight project started in 2019. If anyone has any issues or concerns, they can call the project officer, Steve, and he will go and respond immediately. And there is a reporting procedure in place. And this was advised and agreed with Natural England. And if we do this on Exmoor, we would have the same system in place here. And I would be the officer that would respond. And we also have support from the Exmoor national team. We'd have the Rangers, Rich and Charlotte. We'd have Heather and Ali as well. So on the Isle of Wight, we also have a local steering group with many partners. So we have meetings throughout the year where they're given updates about the birds, they're showing the movements of the birds, and everything's explained in depth. And on this steering group currently sits the sheep farming representatives, including NFU, the National Sheep Group with Phil Stocker and other representatives, and we have the Hampshire Sheep Group. And Andrew Snow at the last meeting last week made a very positive comment that he realises and understands the diet of these birds, and he feels it's very positive to know that they predate mostly on fish, and especially fish is so important in their diet, and there's been no issues with lambs being taken. So we need to remember that 7 eagles have already visited Exmoor, so the eagles have already been here. This is not a new concept. People have seen them, and they've been on sheep farms, and they've been on pheasant shoots, and we've had no conflicts. Also, in Scotland, many people have rumours that they have a compensation scheme. Well, this is not accurate. It's called a sea eagle management scheme. These payments can be made to farmers, but they're more to do with things like husbandry. And these payments support with things like tick treatments, with livestock management, and they're not a compensation for loss of lambs. And also, if you look at the rest of Europe, where people are living with high numbers of eagles, you've got places like Norway, Germany, you have over 1,000 pairs. There's no conflict with livestock, and there's no compensation schemes, because we don't think there's a problem. This is not an issue. So this is just an example of the procedure that would be in place for Exmoor, and this is the procedure that's in place for the Isle of Wight. So if anyone has a concern and they feel that an eagle may have harmed a lamb or taken a lamb, first of all, they contact the team. The project officer visits them immediately. They take the satellite tracking data, they look at the data and see where was that eagle or were there any eagles on that land at the time, and then they assess. And if this, when I talk about this, what's happened so far, we've only got to the second box, and this is what's happened. Steve's gone there, they've looked at the tracking data, and they've realised that there was actually no problem, and the eagle was probably at a rabbit warren, or it's feeding on gulls, or it's feeding on crows within a sheep field, but there's been no killing of livestock. So usually this is de-escalated, but if they feel there's a problem, this would then be brought to the steering group, and it would then be taken to Natural England, and if the bird was proven to have done something, then this bird could be captured and removed from the landscape. So this would be our procedure. There would be no compensation in place. Okay, thanks a lot. If there's any questions, please let me know.
Thank you. That was very comprehensive. Right, over to you, members. Dominic.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for that that presentation, you know, it's great to see it again actually, and really reinforce some of the messages there. It's very useful, and also really appreciate the additional information about that scheme for investigating what might happen if a farmer has concerns. I think one aspect about the paper that we've got in front of us today is it doesn't cover that. And I think it's important, as we know, those of us that do follow social media, is there has been a lot of comment in Exmoor over the last few weeks. And a lot of it ill-informed, a lot of it troublemaking, I'm afraid, and a lot of it then informed by what's been happening anecdotally from Scotland. And of course then there was an article in The Guardian, which I know most Exmoor farmers read avidly, just a couple of days ago. And what was interesting for me about that article was this issue around the differences, and there are big differences between some of that Scottish landscape and down here in Exmoor. And in a denuded landscape with no trees, not much else going on, in what George Monbiot would call a sheep-wrecked landscape, then there's probably not, they're basically, the research is showing, there isn't much else for the eagles to eat apart from predating on maybe sick lambs or already dead lambs. In Exmoor, fortunately, we're not in that position, but I think what I'm trying to say is trying to see whether we can, and by that I mean us in the authority, I think, is try and connect this as much as possible to the nature recovery vision, and try to make it clear that the sea eagles are part of that nature recovery system, and that by having, for instance, increasing tree cover, by which I mean trees in landscapes, by having healthier hedgerows, by ensuring that our wooded valleys stay as healthy as they are, that actually creates shelter, of course, for our livestock, which is good all year round and good for climate change and good for keeping them in shade, but also, of course, it means protection from overhead predators like the very rare sea eagle that might try and predate on a sheep. And I say that as somebody who is a sheep keeper. I'm not, as Mr. Delbridge said, I'm probably not a bona fide sheep farmer, although I am a member of the NSA, so I don't know what that means. But it does mean that, yeah, I think there are concerns, but I think it's important for us to recognise those concerns, and as you've discovered, are not universal across all farms across Exmoor. There's a lot more texture actually in some of those views, and a lot of people are very pleased to see these eagles above us. So thank you very much for the presentation.
Thank you. Jeremy.
Thank you, Chairman, and apologies for my late arrival. Too many phone calls this morning, I'm afraid. Thank you for your presentation, in depth, thank you for coming to Exmoor National Park before you get too far down the road. We have another release of a four-legged animal where we didn't know until it was actually on the go. So I do applaud your processes, and we've seen Brian's eagle. We're about 10 miles away from Castle Hill, and we've seen it several times back when it was there. Yeah. I've had no problems myself. I keep sheep as well. It's interesting, isn't it? I do support the process because I think it's at the top. We've got too many buzzards. Goshawks are now becoming a problem, but there are things that are changing. We're seeing much more variety in our own landscape. And I've got on my phone a kestrel that's come back over the last couple of years. We've got a pair, and it sits on a post in front of my house and feeds, and right in front of us. And after that day's snow, it was there constantly with its mate, taking worms. So it's a very pretty little bird. So I do support the release of this particular bird and your process in particular. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Andrew.
Thank you much. Jane presented very well as she did last time. And Peter, thank you much for coming along. I think it's very positive that we've got a bit more engagement with the farming community. My background, farming background, I have a farm and sheep on it. I'm not a sheep farmer though. When I first heard about this, I think you mentioned Stephen probably about 2 years ago, I was like, why? And that's the first question that I imagine farmers are asking, why? And what's in it for them? But since then, I've heard more, and I've heard that when I went to the National Park Forum up in Newcastle, I heard the feedback from the Scottish farmers versus the Irish farmers, which I found interesting. The Irish farmers seemed more on board, The Scottish farmers, what you've raised on, maybe a fact behind it, and maybe because they're after compensation, I don't know, but it does seem a bit different response there. But it's good we have that engagement with, like, it's very good to hear that we've had engagement with farmers. I mean, the two farmers you mentioned, Stephen and Oliver, Ben was going to be on social media against it, Oliver would be, so it's great to hear he's on board. So I think that's very positive. So I've also just used ChatGPT as we've been here and see in Norway where there are far more eagles. They've done surveys going right back to the 60s looking at this. And they initially found there was some evidence of generally weak and vulnerable lambs being attacked. But then they went back again and looked a bit closer more recently, and they've actually realised there's probably one case in Norway, and there are a lot more eagles in Norway, where there could potentially a live lamb being attacked. But the rest, they realise there are weak and vulnerable lambs. And of course, I've seen on my land weak and vulnerable lambs being attacked. And you never really know what actually caused that. So yeah, I think completely understand that the farmers are asking these questions, and it's great to hear they're coming on board. And I think that what you've done. So, and I think the upside for farmers is increase in tourism, increase in bed and breakfast. I was excited. Zoe sent me a track of the eagle. I forget which number it was, and it actually landed on my farm. I was really excited, and then that experience, it would have been amongst the sheep, changed my mindset on it, and I can see the real benefits of this. But it's right, we've got to keep the farmers on board and ask the questions, what's in it for them? And what's the upside and the downside? And it sounds like we have engaged them quite well, but maybe there's more to do, as we're doing. But I'm, on balance now, I think very much in favour of it. It's just interesting that the Scottish farmers seem slightly more negative, but I just wonder if there's any research, more detailed research, but anecdotal. The Norway research, where we can get more of that looks quite detailed, what I've just read here now, and maybe more information we need to feed to farmers. So, yeah, understandable Peter didn't come along, and it's great, we are engaging. But thank you much, though, good presentation.
Yeah, thanks very much. And I'd just like to add that it's not, we have seen more than 2 farmers. We've seen quite a few. We've seen over a dozen farmers, Rich and I, and also with Charlotte and Heather. So we have engaged, but a lot of the farmers we've spoken to are not vocal, and they don't want to be seen to be supporting this project because they're worried about the consequences if they're seen to be supporting this, for example, at market. And we respect their privacy, so, you know, that's great. We've spoken to them, we know they're comfortable, but they're obviously more silent and not going on social media.
And it's worth adding that, like, say, the Brandon Commoners Council,
Can you use the microphone so people listening in can hear?
Sorry, it's worth adding that groups like the Brendan Commoners Council and all that actually done their own research. They actually spoke to the Isle of Wight, they spoke to farmers on the Isle of Wight, they spoke to the NFU on the Isle of Wight. And dare I say it, but if you read in that Guardian article, it does just seem to keep pointing back that this is an inherently Scottish problem. Nowhere else seems to suffer from this. So, thank you.
Interesting.
One concluding point, I mean, between now, because I'm going to see a lot of Highland farmers, and the question I ask myself, am I prepared to fight the case? And I am. I genuinely believe in it. And the Exmoor Forum on Friday, I'll be prepared to talk about it there. I know it'll be in many pubs. I didn't realise farmers read the Guardian, but interesting. All right.
And we now know Mr. Bray frequents pubs as well. It's quite a day. Robin, you were next.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I spent quite a bit of time at Blackmoorgate Market yesterday. I shall have the joys of going to Clapham with a load of sheep on Wednesday. And I had quite an ear bending from those farmers that obviously didn't go to your presentation, those that probably are not that vocal always and don't like to be seen at those sort of things or haven't got the time. But there is quite a lot of concern out there, and I think need to recognise that. Because it wasn't just one person came and spoke to me, it was quite a topic of conversation. My breakfast took some time to eat. Yeah, right. Similarly, I know if I will get talked to if I go to Catcom tomorrow. So I think there is still some issues, there's quite a lot of work to do around some of that. There's kind of a little bit of a feeling with this in my mind that, you know, from my own perspective, no, I haven't got a problem at the moment. Well, it hasn't affected me anyway, has it? So you kind of wouldn't have a problem. I think the area that you would have a problem is if you found that something did impact you. And you know, within this, before I get down to that bit, really, it'd be quite nice to see a bit more of a holistic plan about reintroductions. I've been here long enough now to see a sort of one beastie at a time reintroduced. It'd be quite nice to have something within our corporate plan, a little bit more realistic. What are we really looking for? What do we see the potential with or not? Where do we see the potential problems long term? So rather than just picking off one thing at a time, that would be quite back of my mind. Data. Data's always great, and you've got loads of data, but data by its very nature is historical. It can't see into the future. And I think we've just got to bear that in mind. Data's always useful to inform, but it won't tell you what's actually going to happen. And I know they're here already. I've seen them before. And, you know, it doesn't eat lambs, it eats other wildlife. Well, I'm not sure if I was some of the wildlife that was mentioned, I'd be happy about white-tailed eagle, if I was its lunch. So it's kind of that feeling, just that level of understanding as to what's out there, as to what impact it might have on some of those small mammals. And is it all going to be positive or not? Or are there going to be potentially those unforeseen circumstances? Around the sheep bit, well, yeah, no sheep have been taken here, none in Isle of Wight. But just bear in mind, we haven't had a resident breeding pair here, have we? They've been visiting, is that correct?
That's correct, but we do have a resident pair in West Sussex,
Yeah.
and they have not taken any in West Sussex.
No. Which is good news, and I would hope that when it happens here, we don't have the same problem and have it. Just bear in mind, though, that sheep farming is changing, and this is where the difference between data and reality. If I'd looked over Exmoor 10 years ago, there was virtually nothing been lambed outdoors at all. Everything would have been lambed in a shed, put outdoors, good strong lambs. In reality, the change now is, what we are getting is everybody is moving their sheep outdoors to be lambing them outside. So actually, it's nearly like dangling a carrot in front of something, isn't it, really? The numbers of sheep on Exmoor are considerably more than you tend to find in West Sussex or Isle of Wight. You know, it is a sheep farming area here rather than anything. So it's that kind of opportunity. So the question I'd ask there really is, if you have a road bird, and it probably would be a road bird, is need to see that there would be really good control mechanisms for dealing with it if one went rogue and it was found to be targeting. And I think it would probably be realistic to ask that within the group that was looking at it, that right at the beginning we'd need to be sure that somebody independent could be the liaison rather than the White-tailed Eagle project. Because otherwise I just know the antagonism that would instantly start. It would be, you know, you would say that approach, wouldn't it? Fishing. Yeah. I suppose in reality that if you were a fish you wouldn't be that keen on one either. We've got a huge amount of coast. But there is that challenge, isn't it? If it moves a little bit more, and we find no nesting on the southern side of the moor, is it going to be a slightly different challenge or not? And again, data, assessment, but there needs to be that control mechanism if anything happens. I think from a point of view of the National Park Authority as well, I've always bear in mind that if you get a problem, it will be highlighted into a huge proportion. If it's one bird goes rogue, that will become a massive public opinion problem, won't it? We've seen that with, and social media will do that for us, with no question. So it's kind of just to ensure that we've got a system in place, that we're aware as a national park by endorsing this fully, what we're doing, and potentially what's there, and we've got written into whatever we do the ability to ensure that if there's a problem, we can deal with it. And we can deal with that, and we can explain really well to anyone involved. Public perception surveys. I'm just going to answer that one really. I suppose looking at the percentages involved, I'd hesitate to make a sort of a guess, but I would sort of, at a rough guess looking at it, think that probably not too far equates by the number of farmers that responded. against a number of the general public that responded. So it's just that interesting challenge. You know, it's those people that may be potentially impacted that will be concerned most about it at the moment, rather than a member of the public. Great to see them. Yeah, I've got no problem with that. But then I'm probably the world's worst sort of bird person anyway. I can sort of identify a pigeon or a buzzard and a rook or a crow, and that's about it. An eagle's quite easy because it would be big, wouldn't it? And then of course probably not helped by the negative comments, with quite a lot of negative comments around in the Guardian one, which obviously came out a couple of days ago, which you would kind of expect. But if you're going to have a group together, make sure it's open enough to be inclusive. I think you just need to do a little bit more about being able to liaise with the farming community and explain. Because it would be a lot easier to do that extra liaison and discussion with them now than it will be to firefighting a problem afterwards. That's to reiterate what I've had my ear bent about recently, just so that you know what's out there as well as the positive stuff. Right?
Okay, thanks. So let's respond to some of those. So on the Isle of Wight, we have outdoor lambing and we have eagles. And the birds are not just constrained to the Isle of Wight. We've got 2 pairs in Dorset, we've got a pair in West Sussex, and the birds also visit Hampshire as well. With the procedure and the response procedure, we have a clear procedure in place. This procedure is in place for the Isle of Wight. It has not been needed, but we have a clear procedure for Exmoor. So we'll have somebody responding, they'll be working with Natural England, they'll be working with the steering group. And the steering group, as I mentioned, also has clear representation from sheep farmers. We have, so the steering group for the Isle of Wight has the NSU, it has the National Sheep Group, and it has Hampshire Sheep Group. So we would have the same thing here. So anyone from Exmoor involved with the sheep farming would be invited to be on the steering group. We've been consulting with people for 3.5 years. The public perception survey is open to everybody. Anyone can respond, any sheep farmer. We've been publicising it, it's on our website. We've told your Hill Farming Network. People should have the news, it's out there. And also as members, you should be promoting that survey. Everyone has a say here, and we're open and willing to visit any farmer that wants. And we have not been requested, so if anyone wants it, they need to request. You have to work with us. You've also got the connections here. You've got the National Sheep Group on the Isle of Wight steering group. If you have any concerns, you should be going to them. You've got Phil Stocker. Peter can go to Phil Stocker. So have these connections been being made as well? Have you spoken to Phil Stocker, Peter?
Up until last Friday, when Liz Fuller told me at the Exmoor Horn dinner, I didn't know this was taking place.
Okay, but you...
That's exactly the problem that Robin said. We've not been engaged with yet, and that needs to happen.
Okay, but I would just ask, why is your National Sheep Group not informing you? Because they're on our steering group, and they've been told...
Unfortunately, Peter isn't a member of the committee, so he can't speak, so we need to be really sorry.
We'll speak after, sorry.
I can be very strict if I need to be. The whip gets brought out. No, that's fine, but I did need to stop that.
Okay,
right.
That's fine.
I have a list. We're going to go down this. We've got a very long day, members. I don't want to stifle debate, but let's try not to get into good old chat somewhere.
Sorry, can I just come back just to add to what Zoe said about the public perception survey? So I was having a look at some of the data yesterday, and I'd filtered it on sort of agricultural farming, and it was very interesting. So we'd had 40 responses related to farming or agriculture, and actually 20 were opposed, as we may expect, but 20 were positive. So I think that gives an interest of people who bothered to do the survey, and I appreciate surveys aren't for everyone. There was a 50-50 split, so I think that's quite an interesting observation. Thanks.
Thank you. Bill, you're next on my list.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I think I came to the NCAP meeting and was enthused with the idea of white-tailed eagles, but then I did a bit more research, and actually I do read The Guardian online occasionally, and saw the article. I live very close to Brian Mitchell. I've seen the eagle at home, and I've seen them on the Isle of Mull, where my sister-in-law lived. And it's interesting to see in the article that 40% of nests on Mull have got sheep remains in them. Now, they could have been dead already, but they, eagles will eat sheep, and they will take a live red deer calf. That they have been seen doing that. So, and the thing is, my thing is, you mustn't underplay the possible problems. You must actually face them. So don't underplay the possible. It's no good saying it's not happening in Sussex. This is not Sussex. It's not Scotland either, but it could happen here. So therefore, you need to engage and be prepared to face, as Robin said, the possibility of a row. And we don't, touch wood, we don't get any predation by foxes of our lands, never known one. Neighbouring farms will get, it seems to be something that's learnt. So if the adults take live lambs, then the young will. And if it's not happening in the south of England, but if you're bringing breeding pairs, I don't know if you are from Scotland, perhaps they will have that innate sort of idea that it's fine to take, small sheep and even bigger sheep. So, and the thing is, that information is all available out there. So you mustn't underplay it when you're presenting. Otherwise, they think, well, why is she not saying that, or in Ottawa, why is she not telling us about what's happening in Scotland? They get up to £5,000, but that is nobody's actually seen, I don't think, them taking a live lamb. So, but the government realise it is a problem. So, and I think you need a way of tackling that perception of what's out on social media. Otherwise, you won't win everybody over. You'll always have that number of people that, and I've seen one or two of the comments, which are, not great. So, but I'm still an enthusiast. But I do think you need to face up to the possible problems. And when you present, make sure that farmers are allowed to challenge you on it.
Yeah. No, that's a valid point. And honestly, we are very open to all farmers, and that's why I'm open to visiting them, speaking with them, and giving them the evidence, and listening to them as well, because we're completely sympathetic to them. So any concerns, we will go and see them. So we're definitely not underplaying it. I'm sorry if it's come across like that, but it shouldn't be like that, no. We're just presenting, obviously, our information from the Isle of Wight. We don't work on the birds in Scotland, so we couldn't comment exactly. That's why we're not including that.
Can I just come back and say that's my whole point, is that it's out there, so you have to tackle it, even though you're not, you meant to talk about Scottish eagles, but Scottish eagles are believed to be taking lambs, so you have to say, well, just saying they don't take them down here isn't going to answer the sheep farmers at Cuckham and Blackmore Gate and people that I meet who are concerned. So.
Yeah, no, that's a valid point. But it's also a valid point to say that none of the eagles in Scotland have had satellite trackers, so they've not had such extensive research done onto their movements and their feeding habits.
Susan?
I'll keep it really brief. So first of all, I just wanted to really applaud and thank Zoe and Ali and Heather and Rich and Charlotte and the rest of the team for the amount of engagement that you've done, because I've been in a similar position in the past with beavers, reintroduction in the Otter Valley, and I think you've been doing an amazing job and continue to do so. Obviously, it's unfortunate that not everybody does know about it, but there is sometimes you can only do so much and go to so many forums and so many meetings, and I know you will continue to do so, but I'm just really impressed by the extent that work's already been done. And secondly, just to pick up on what Robin and Dominic were saying, that I think there is an underlying issue here around needing to look at this reintroduction and other potential reintroductions in the wider concept of nature recovery. And you can put the species back, but you also need to have a landscape with which they can live in, with habitat-rich landscape to have them back into. So we need to think of that bigger picture. And it's something I've mentioned several occasions before, which again Robin mentioned today, about needing to look at species instructions as a collective, not saying one species here, one species there. And we do, again, it's a bit hobby horse of mine, I know, it's not helpful to think of, we like that species, we don't like that one's good, that one's bad, that kills that does this. It's rough out there, everyone's killing everyone every day. And it's not that, we can't sort of, that's not very nice to pour this back. We need to kind of, really just sort of accept that and really look, through the nature recovery vision and all the work we're doing, across Exmoor and with landowners to actually build a really, strong, rich habitat, which all these species, which should, of course, were happily living here until we came and blasted them away, should be able to live in. So yeah, and I'm just very supportive of taking this project forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Stephen, you were next. You didn't put your hand up. Gosh, what's wrong with me today?
Well, Never mind, Madam Chairman. I would just like to say I think the presentation has been deeply impressive and very clear, and I think we all appreciate that. I think that, generally speaking, the project is one which we were and are keen to see succeed. However, I think the point that Mr. Delbridge is making, and others are echoing around the room, is that in order for it to succeed well and to be well received by the local population, there probably does need to be some more work done with the farming community. And I suggest that this isn't ad hoc contact with individual farmers. This is actually meeting with the farming organisations proactively, and that perhaps this morning gives the opportunity to focus on that. So the National Sheep Association, the NFU local branch, formally I think they need to be met with and talked with, and some of the points that have been made to us very clearly and successfully need to be made with those organisations, and engagement at that formal level. I think that's the key point that's coming forward this morning. Thank you for letting me speak, Madam Chair.
That's all right. I'm sorry, I honestly thought you put your hand up. So you spoke to the Hill Farm Network, didn't you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We've spoken to the Hill Farm Network. We've got the NFU on our steering group.
Okay.
We're meeting with the local NFU this afternoon. So we do have a lot of these things in place. And we have been a bit surprised that there's been a lack of communication within organisations, because, you know, if we're informing at a national level, we would have... anyway, but we will make extra effort, and that's really a positive. So good advice. Thank you.
Francis?
Since you called my neighbour, he said much of what I was
Oh,
going
sorry.
to say. However, I just would add to that. I absolutely endorse what Stephen said. I would add to that it is incumbent upon those people who want to do something to go on communicating as much as they can, because communication is never done. There's never enough of it. And I think it's important not to feel, oh, well, why haven't they asked us? It needs to be the other way round, the boots on the other foot. And there will always be need for more, and nobody should be ever surprised that there are people who still don't know, and you need to go on making the effort.
Yeah, and that's something that we'll do. We're not just going to release these birds and not talk to people. We're going to be there the whole way. As soon as they're out, we're going to be constantly supporting people, visiting them, giving landowners maps.
That's absolutely fine, but it just to reinforce the point, it's the formal to the local groups. It's not about saying, well, why haven't you asked us? It's about going to them.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, good advice. And also, at the end of the day, there's not always a project that's going to satisfy everybody. But something important that's been highlighted from Ireland and the Isle of Wight is that once people have had the birds in the landscape, they've changed their perception, because then they fully understand. There's only so much information and talking that can be done. But to actually see a bird, understand its ecology, its behaviour, is probably the best and most persuasive mechanism there is.
Jeremy Holton, you were next.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. All I was going to, because a lot has been said already, all I was going to do is just reflect. Norway has been mentioned. I was just going to reflect on some bits from Norway, because I have a connection there. The white-tailed eagle was threatened in Norway until 1968, when it was protected species, and it was extinct in the south of Norway. Since then, an organisation called NINA has ensured that there are now seagulls around the whole of the Norwegian coast, and it's them that have contributed to the restoration of populations in Ireland, Scotland and Spain as well, which hasn't been mentioned as experience from the Asturias. And what I'm saying is if people want to look at more long-lived data, there's lots of key figures and documents on NINA's website, and it's worth looking. The other thing from Norway is we've mentioned ecotourism, and just the experience there. It would be well to look the impact of eagle tourism. And if anyone's ever been on the post boat, the Hurtigruten, they'll know that you can stop off in Lofoten and look at the sea eagles. And it's that creates, lots and lots of people put millions of pounds into the Norwegian economy to go and look in Lofoten and places like Smolla, which is in Moore and Romsdal. So the opportunities for ecotourism are huge, and we should be looking to that, grasping it. And I expect people should be investing in ribs to take out tourists from, Linton and Warlock and places like that. Well, Stephen Davitt. Yeah, but yeah, it was those points that I wanted to make. Just to say that there is a lot of data there from the original source of Nina, who were the people who started the eagle reintroduction.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that, I actually have worked for Nina. I helped with the translocation to Ireland in 2022 of white-tailed eagle, and I've also worked for them with the osprey translocation to Ireland. And we have strong partnership and connections with them. And Duncan Halley is actually originally from Scotland and now works in Norway, and he has labelled the sheep issue of Scotland as a Scotland-only issue, quote from Norway.
Interesting. Now you have to wait, I'm afraid. Jeremy.
Thank you, Chairman. Very, very briefly, just to support everything that's been said this morning, I think every word is useful. But the one thing I haven't heard much about is fish farming and sporting fishing, and there's quite a lot of it around Exmoor, certainly on the south side. I'm not sure how much of a risk it is. I have half a dozen lakes myself, which are managed by Tiverton Angling Club, and sporting fishing. So, it's quite expensive to lose a carp. We have the Polish issue as well. I shouldn't have said that probably, but they like to eat them rather than put them back, I'm afraid. And we're all cameraed up for that. Otters can be a problem, but we can bounce them out. But that's just one area we don't seem to have mentioned this morning. So just to get it on the record.
Do they go to the fish farms?
They most likely usually go to the coast, or they like quite an undisturbed area. They don't really like a populated place to go fishing because they're quite shy birds. But something that's happened with the ospreys in Rutland, a fish farmer had concerns about the ospreys taking fish, and he actually set up a photography hide and realised that he could make huge amounts of money, and now has completely changed his mind and is eager for the ospreys to come back and actually have those opportunities. So you could also start cashing in here if you want to.
The biggest problem for us is cormorants.
Yeah,
Dive and damage.
They will help you because they'll displace the cormorants, and they also steal food from cormorants and could also predate on a cormorant, so they may be of help to you.
And that is why I think I support this project, because it's their top end, not too many of them, big territories, and then they do help to deal with the other issues we have. I think it's really interesting watching the carrion crows mobbing the buzzards, and they'll push them right away. They even push this little castor of ours out because it's their territory. I used to really keep the corvids down. Now I'm not quite.
Don't stop this now, because it is starting to sound like the sort of programmes my husband watches on television, like with the Vikings coming, which is quite horrible. Robin.
Right, quite brief. I was only looking at the recommendation really, and the reality is that number one in the recommendation fits directly with the expectation DEFRA have of the National Park Authority in our long-term management. It's not possible to argue with that particular one in my mind at all. The second one, location of the release on land owned by EMPA, which is the really important one around this authority at the moment as well. Location to remain confidential. Obviously birds are tagged and everything. At what point would does confidentiality disappear because of the tagging and if the data is available? So how long are you expecting it to remain confidential, that release? And then at what point would that become a sort of a more upfront bit of what we do within the nature recovery stuff and so on? Just so people are aware as we go forward. How long does confidentiality last?
Well, the release site will be confidential, but obviously if anyone has an eagle on their land, we will share the data with them. So that's not confidential because we'll be working together with landowners.
Right, I can see no more hands. So I am going to propose the recommendation with an addition. It's got you all listening now. So the addition is, so we've got 1 and 2. I'm going to add in to note that the project will monitor the white-tailed eagles once released, and there will be a project officer in post who will liaise with landowners and farmers to be the first point of contact of the project. Can I have a seconder, please? Thank you. All those in favour? Unanimous. Thank you very much. Thank you. Can I thank Mr. Delbridge for coming? Please do come again. And can I thank you for your presentation and how well received this has been. And we're looking forward to it, and we would all want to get involved, I think. Thank you so much. Now, in addition, because something else has come up, is that about recovery and about that bigger picture. I'm going to ask the Chief Executive to work the way forward so we can get together, maybe a member group and talk about the bigger picture. I've now got a problem with members disappearing. Members, I'm afraid we're going on to less exciting issues now. Even more important, has the word auditing. So we're just having a little swap around so that Ben can come up here and talk about the equally important stuff. Less pretty pictures. I don't know where Mr. Yabs is gone, but we're going to go straight into item 6, please.
Thank you, Chair, and apologies, this may be a less interesting item, but our governance is, I suppose, equally important and supports the ability for us to undertake these activities. So good morning, members. Apologies, my voice is slightly dodgy today. I will try and muster on. Item 6 is the completion of the 2023-24 audit, both from our statement of accounts, our financial statements, but also from our value for money arrangements. So Grant Thornton, our auditors, issued an unqualified opinion and stated that the work on value for money arrangements did not identify any significant weaknesses. So our finance accounts, final accounts committee received the audit findings reports, the auditor's annual report, and their letters for the 2023-2024 financial year on the 5th of November. At the same meeting, members authorised the issue of our letter of representation to those charged with governance, alongside adopting the 23-24 statement of accounts and the annual governance statement. So I can confirm the signed audit opinion has been received, and we have fully complied with the publication of the accounts and the requirements contained within the audit closure letter of the 5th of November. So this is a fairly short item. You have as an appendix the auditor's audit findings reports. And the recommendations are for authority to receive the audit findings report, to receive the electronic publication letter, and to note the signed auditor's opinion and publication requirements of the audit conclusion statement have been complied with. So I'd glad to take any questions on those areas.
Thank you very much, Ben. Anybody got any questions? It's all a bit housekeeping. Mandy.
Thank you. Just want to say well done. Great audit report. I think if you look around the country, there are a lot that are not. So well done to you and the team. It's nice to have it in a timely manner. Just one question really. Given on review there were no impact on the audit for all of the 4 significant risks, so there's no impact. My question is, should they still be included as significant risks if they are not?
Ben.
Thank you, Mandy. Could you what point you're referring to?
Significant risks highlighted in the audit report.
Andy, could you just put them up, please?
Yeah, you can have.
Apologies. There's 4 significant risks in the report. They're all the red high risks. I haven't got a page number. It's in Appendix Annex 1, ICT audit findings. So it's around the ICT.
Yep.
There's 4 there that are the only significant risks, and when I read it through, it said none of them are at all, and then no, they are not significant, so should they still be included in the report? Because it's the only red in the report, which is why I went to it and had a close look.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm on track now. So these all relate to the fact that Somerset Council host our financial system currently, and so all the risks around that system hosting. So whilst they are all red and important areas to be addressed, they aren't anything that we can actually have a bearing on as an authority, and don't directly impact on us. So for this year in question, they are vitally required. We are changing our finance system, and we have go live on the 31st of January 2025. So following that, we will no longer have a finance system hosted by Somerset. So the risks will remain, but they'll be mitigated by a different system and a different set of controls. But in this report in question, yes, they are valid to be there, but yes, they don't pose a significant risk that the authority will fail in any of its processes.
Thank you. Might not see them next year then.
Maybe not.
Robin?
I'd just like to move the recommendation.
Any further questions anybody wants to ask? No? All those in favour? Thank you, it's unanimous. Moving on to item 7, and staying with our finance officer.
Thank you, Chairman. So this is a rather more weighty report and a fairly heavily loaded recommendation covering several areas. So I'm just going to take you through the recommendations first, then go through each of the sections of the report just to give you a bit of background information. But the assumption is you've had the opportunity to review the report. So recommendations are to note the financial performance of the first 6 months of 24-25, that's our management accounts. To approve the revised budget for 24-25 in Appendix 2. That's our overall year budget position. To note the position on the programmes and partnerships budget and our capital programme, which are Appendix 3 and 4. To note the position regarding reserves and the projected balance on our general fund reserve, as at 31st of March 2025, projection of about 550,000. To note the revised medium-term financial plan position for the 5-year period, including this current year. And to note the updated position of DEFRA one-off capital and revenue funds. So that's all the recommendations, and I'll just take you through in a little bit more detail in here. So the report represents our mid-year look at financial performance. So it includes a review of the management accounts and the budgetary monitoring. And it's an opportunity to really revise our full-year budget and look forwards towards the future. Section 2 of the narrative deals with our revenue budget position, and it links to Appendix 1. Appendix 1 breaks down our organisational structure across each of the budget headings. It provides the original budget, a profiled budget for the first 6 months of the year, our revised income and expenditure position, and associated net expenditure and any variances between the two. And along these, it details the most significant variances are in there. So the reported position of the management accounts at the end of September 24 is a positive variance of around 330,000, which is relatively significant. But that's primarily due to 2 factors. One is the additional one-off funding provided by DEFRA, which was formally announced after our budget was set by members in March. The second element relates to the farming protected landscapes for FIPL, HBRG, historic buildings renovation grants, where we've received allocations but not actually provided that funding out yet. Excluding that, the variance is very minimal, around about 5k, so it's a very small percentage of our operations. So within paragraph 2.7, I provide you with some detail of the key variances there across the services. Section 3 of the report covers the key themes within the revised budget, which is contained within Appendix 2. During the year, I've actually applied significant changes to the dynamics of the budget process, and really taken the opportunity to overhaul this basis on which we do the budgeting, provide budget across the organisation. So for this review, this view of the budget, we've actually brought in all our project expenditure and staffing, our income, all our expenditure lists, and we've moved away from what we historically called the core budget, which is principally permanent only staff basis. So historically, project funding and associated income and expenditure has been excluded from the budget and the medium-term financial plan, as the position on these items is generally netted to zero. Whilst the net position is relatively unchanged in the budget, you'll notice increase in reported income and expenditure is quite significant in places. And this really helps us to compare across various factors, across year on year. It's very useful for our audit process, because actually, if you're looking at original budgets, and then comparing actuals, as you've got all project spending, income and expenditure can vary quite differently. So this year we've decided to bring that in together. So another important factor of the revised budget is the pay award, and that was finalised for 24-25 as these papers were being produced. The actual award is a mixed approach. So for all, for most pay points up to senior officer, it was £1,290 per pay point, and above that 2.5%. So the actual award equates to around 3.9% impact on us. We budgeted for 3% in our budget papers, so there's a slightly adverse impact on the authority in terms of the original budget position on that. So the core variances in the build of the revised estimates is principally in relation to income. So we have some very positive trends across income, particularly across national park centres again. That seems to be maintained. Car parking is slightly above process, and also due to the cash flow implications, we're actually seeing a large increase in our bank and deposit interest, and you'll see that in the Treasury Management Report a bit later on this morning. So that's the revised budget element of the paper. Section 4 of the report is in relation to the top slice programmes and partnerships budget, so where we support initiatives that are longer in term than 1 year, and also delivered by partners. There is actually no change proposed in this report to that. And then part 5 of the report, section 5, details our capital and reserves position. So I would like to say that we have made good progress in continuing to improve our environmental resilience and the greening of our fleet. So during 24-25 so far, we've added 2 Nissan Leaf pool cars to replace diesel equivalents. We've added a 9-seater Citroen Space Tourer EV to replace a diesel Volkswagen Caddy for our volunteer and education interpretation team. And we've just received a plug-in hybrid Peugeot to replace a further pool car. So this really contributes to our environmental resilience, but it's also supporting kind of reducing costs in terms of elsewhere. So projected position on reserves is detailed in Appendix 4, and our reserves are detailed in Appendix 5, and these contain a forward projection to 31st of March 2027. So in effect a 3-year approach. And at that point I'm indicating a closing authority position of approximately £2 million on our reserves. That's both the general funds and earmarked reserves. So currently we're looking at, we open the year with about £3.5 million opening balance on those. Paragraph 5.9, if I can refer you to that, essentially contains a statement of the adequacy of our general fund reserves. So that's essentially the projected balance of 550,000 is deemed sufficient to meet unforeseen or exceptional expenditure, and equates to approximately 1 month of our general expenditure. So in section 6, I then project forwards our medium-term financial plan, or MTFP assumptions, and have updated them to reflect the latest position, taking into account the 6-month budgetary position for the authority. And alongside the revised budget, I've also included this as a full cost basis for projects. So you'll see there's a marked increase in terms of income and expenditure in both areas. Following the impact of the organisation-wide business review, which took really kind of effect on the 1st of April this year, the forward look for the 5-year medium-term financial plan retains a balanced budget position for both the current year, 24-25, and also on the assumptions we've used for the 25-26 year. We then see a gradual squeeze and a deepening of our expenditure over income for the periods through to 28-29, where I'm suggesting we have an annual savings requirement of around about £120,000. And that is purely because a large proportion of our income is provided by the DEFRA grants. We are maximising as much as we can other corporate and investment and income potentials. And we are facing inflation in wage bills and other areas. So if the current situation is maintained, whilst we are doing everything we can to increase income in other areas, if our core grant stays the same or flatlined or reduces, we will face this squeeze. We're all decent. So we've faced real-term cuts in our national park grants of around 2.93 million since 2010. And in terms of cost projections, every percent on our staff pay award has a roughly £30,000 impact on the authority. So beyond 25-26, our position sustainability does come into question without an upward tick in our core grant from DEFRA. So our business process review enabled us to have a realistic prospect of setting a balanced budget in future years. It's really helped us to get back on track really in that in terms of meeting our outgoings. But the good stewardship of resources which are contained within this organisation, detailed in the report, are essential to ensure we have a viable, enabling organisation which is at the forefront of planning for the future. So that's the core kind of conclusion really. But I've also included section 7, so apologies for the additional bits, where DEFRA provided each National Park Authority with £500,000 of additional one-off funding, notified in April this year, with a split of £250,000 towards revenue, £250,000 towards capital. Members would have seen that in the July papers. Appendix 7 provides the current process on those spends. All areas have robust plans, and aside from a slight change in focus on one of the capital allocations around the Lynmouth Pavilion toilets, we are on track to make full use of this funding in the periods concerned. So I do apologise for the length of this, but I think there's a kind of natural flow for those. I would be delighted to take any questions you have on those areas. Thanks for bearing with me on that one.
Thank you so much. Fran?
Not working.
But on the end.
Oh, right, okay, sorry. Thank you. I just had I don't know if you'll be able to provide the information now, and I probably should have sent the question in sooner. I noticed about the Lynmouth Centre toilet refurbishment. I have been in the centre, but I can't recall, are those public toilets? And if so, do we charge? Because the last time I went to Lynmouth, I was very surprised, and there was other people there as well, the fact that the town council charged 50p to use their public toilets there. So, and a lot of people didn't want to pay that amount of money. Are we then going to get a lot of people displaced into our public toilets? And is that an opportunity, or is it going to cause more issues for us within those? I know that's a small amount, well, 20,000, but I think it's something that it's just come into my mind, and I wanted to raise that at this moment. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, we are seeing impact on our toilet facilities there. Technically, they aren't public toilets. They are principally there for the users of the centre and for the restaurant business on the first floor. But they are seeming to be used more and more as a public toilet because of the situation in Lynmouth. So it does have an impact on their usage and their condition, unfortunately. We've not progressed into charge for the use of toilets. It's a very difficult area to go down, in my personal view, and not one that I would like to do, but it will need resolving. This is actually the capital item that we have essentially wired to another area, because we've got a situation in the Pavilion National Park Centre where our heating has failed back in August. The heating is an air source heat pump on the roof of the building, and through working with suppliers and various engineers, we've been unable to find a credible alternative at this stage. So we've had to put temporary heating in both the upstairs and downstairs areas. So rather than spending this allocation on the toilets, we are seeking to actually use that towards the replacement of the heating system. So the centre was finished in 2013. The heating element is on the roof at the rear of the building, and has been subject to deterioration from the coastal aspect, and has actually fallen through the casing of the unit. So we're seeking to actually reuse the funds set aside for this on the replacement heating system, which will benefit both ourselves and our tenants.
There is an impact without a doubt. And I've had to a couple of times go and tell the staff the state of the toilets, because obviously they're being used far more than they ever were. So, yeah, it's not great. Okay, next person was Andrew.
Thank you, Ben. A lot of material to go through. Good material, of course. I mean, a couple of over observations, a few direct questions. It seems that funding is becoming more and more project-based, and that is obviously great, but obviously raises challenges, I guess, because traditional accounting isn't good at dealing with project funding. So as was one thought, do you see any difference in the way you're going to manage going forward this project funding, or is there going to be more emphasis on managing the finances on projects? And that sort of brings me to two other points, really. One was the cash flow. I can see that there's money outstanding on some incomes. I mean, on Appendix 1. The funding coming in is obviously masking some of the detail underneath that. But there's one, for example, there's 87,000 outstanding in countryside stewardship income. So I guess to me that's an example going forward where project funding is becoming more important, and managing that project funding will be more and more important. Then actually, my other question is on 5.3, where you've made the point members should note, so I did. that part funded from capital receipts is due to certain assets, and I guess that's sale of land. Do we have an update on that? Because I think that relates to Driver Farm and Common. Have we got an update on that? Because obviously, you're right, we should note. And then the third point really is, with funding going to project-based, I can see there's some more challenges, but good. The reserves are dropping quite considerably, which you said you're comfortable with, but they were at 3.7, so now going to just under 2 million. Particularly under the revenue earmark reserves, they dropped considerably. You said you're comfortable, but they were high before, so were they too high before, and they're going to be too low now? So just your thoughts on that, because that's a massive, it's almost 100% decrease. So for me to explain that away to someone, I just wonder what your views on that would be.
Yeah. Thank you. Yes, so in terms of the first one, yes, project elements are becoming more and more prevalent. I mean, historically, we would have said that National Park Grant provides around 75% of our income. Latest figures are currently looking around the 50 to 52% mark. So including FIPL, it's more kind of around about 65% funded by DEFRA. So that weighting has changed as we've become more adept at levering project funding in, that we've grown our own income sources. So yes, we have seen a trend in that. And we are looking at systems and processes that support projects. So inevitably that relates to staffing and the calibre of the staff to be able to secure match funding, to secure the project management process, and to work with partners primarily. So yes, we are seeing a need to ensure we've got the capacity to undertake projects. We've got the systems that support project delivery. So our new finance system has a project management arm of it, which will help us to manage projects in a consistent way. But yes, very much so. It's something that's becoming more bread and butter for us day by day. So from those two. In terms of the lag, we have certain areas where there is a lag. I mean, countryside stewardship is one of the significant ones, especially in our estate scheme and also in our woodlands areas, where we undertake the work but then actually get the CS receipts later in the year. We have other areas where we have funding in advance. So part of mine and the team's role is to manage that cash flow. And at the moment, we are in a fairly beneficial position that we have significant reserves and we've got a relatively significant cash flow. So this timing issue isn't an issue for us currently. But as we go through and our reserves do reduce, then that may be a time when that becomes more important. We don't hold investments. All our surplus cash is actually taken by Somerset Council and invested in their treasury management arm, and we receive essentially you'll see in the treasury management paper, but we receive a reasonable percentage income, but it's all accessible cash. So if we wanted that money back, we would get it back in 2 to 3 days. The third point was around the sale of assets. So it's a sport driver farm, and pleased to say that the East Anstey sale has completed, and we have the funds in for that. So that will really support the work that's going on with driver. And then the final element, in terms of the reserves, yes, there is a marked reduction. Most of the earmarked reserves are held for specific projects and have either been the case of historic funding that's been held and maintained and built up. I would say that the reserves over the last decade have been significantly high. And what we're seeing here is actually utilisation of that in terms of the projects being undertaken. So our general fund reserves remain the same, projecting 500 to 550,000. But our earmarked reserves are for specific projects or programmes that overlap one financial year. So they might be a 5-year, it might be a decade-long programme. So what I'm projecting in this appendix is a gradual drawdown of those to undertake those projects. So as we develop the partnership plan and corporate plan in future years, we will need resources to undertake that. So there will be opportunity to grow those reserves of those projects, but we'll be able to see a much more kind of project-based approach on those. Is that?
Yes. Yes, I can see, look at the figures, why that's come down, and it's, yes, whereas in your earmarking these projects, so yeah, thanks. And it'd be interesting going forward seeing how that new system is working for project managers. I suppose there's always danger it become bureaucratic and take flexibility out of projects, but there's always that importance to manage the cash flow. Often a good spreadsheet is as good as anything, but built-in systems can be quite bureaucratic, and that's, I guess, the journey you're going to need to go down to find out what's right.
Yes, and bear in mind that we've got various people doing projects work across the organisation, so the system is not there to do it for them, it's to help them have a framework that they can run projects through. So the skills are still there and the people concerned.
Good.
Thank you. Mandy, you were next.
Thank you. I think it's a challenge keeping the books, as it were, when you've got large projects, and that means large swings and movements of money quite often, and also it's even more challenging when that flow sometimes delayed and sometimes in advance. So keeping an eye on anything and everything is really challenging. And I think for me, it's moving forward is that interplay between staff being financed via projects and not. And I think as we move forward, there will be more of that. And again, how you account for that adds an extra dimension for you. And I suppose for me, the challenge moving forward is, should the authority invest more in bid writing, is there more out there you could go for and you could cover the cost effectively of effective bid writing with what you bring in. So I think the more we move in that direction, the more consideration we need to give given to that when we look at next year's budget. But a couple of questions. Firstly, around the pre-existing approvals Appendix 4, which is the capital programme. Everything approved on Appendix 4 is lovely, even numbers, to near 1,000 normally, but you've got a number there that have been completed. I sort of was expecting to see the sort of cost at completion, just to see whether we're over, under, or things are costing us more or less. I'm just really conscious at the moment. There's a lot of up and down with cost of works and raw materials, etc. So I'd be really interested to know whether, when we are budgeting, whether they have come in on budget, over budget, or under budget, and I couldn't see that in Appendix 4. So I'll leave that there. And the only other question I had actually was around one of the recommendations, and it says to authorise the Chief Executive and Chief Finance Officer to make such adjustments as are necessary to keep within the overall budget and with the objective of transferring underspends that arise to reserves. I couldn't fully understand that. Are you talking about environment? Are you talking about moving from one budget line to another? And at what point would you be looking at transferring into and out reserves? I couldn't quite understand what that full authority was for and what it meant. So if you could talk me through that, it'd be appreciated.
Thank you. So the first point around, say, the projects and the bid writing, we've actually used some of the DEFRA allocation, Appendix 7, around about 15k towards supporting project working, and we're kind of exploring ideas of how to utilise that. But yes, yeah, definitely, it's a really valid point. And also your point around Appendix 4 on the cost of completion. I apologise, I don't have a figure in there for the completion of this, but it's a really good point to build in line, and one that I will do on future iterations of this appendix. So thank you for that. That's really positive. In terms of the transfer, essentially it's our year-end mop-up situation. So we review the activity across all our cost centres and projects at the end of the year. Where there's items that are kind of available for project work in future years, we will transfer that to a reserve. Or if there are items such as some of the woodlands work on hazardous trees last year that we were unable to fund from other sources, we would then utilise the general fund to support that. So it's essentially a year-end balancing mechanism to ensure that we kind of have consistent balances on our general fund and earmark reserves moving forwards.
Thank you, I get that. It would be perhaps nice to have had at year end or something in there just to highlight that, because I didn't quite fully understand, so thanks for the explanation.
Yeah. Thank you.
Bill?
Thank you, Chairman. My point specifically on driver, I'd like to get a handle on how much money is going in and what it's being spent on, and how much, and where we are on the project, and what more we need to spend. It's just a large amount of money. I see it says we've got 740,000 going into under the in Appendix 4, and it mentions 100,000 of the desperate one-off payment was going to sort of cross-cutting project, because the sale of East Hampstead was progressing slowly, which has now happened. I just wonder where we do we know how will we know how much we got for East Hampstead and the other bits of land that we sold? Will there be like a separate account for what the work that's going to driver? It's not actually in the driver report. There are yesterday on the park life, there's indication of where some of the other money is coming from. But it'd be nice to just have a feeling of where we are and what the total cost is so far and where we're going with it.
I believe there's a planned update. There's the planned update for driver this afternoon.
Yeah, but
there's also.
Sorry, I don't think there's any financial update. Sorry, that was as such, not in the paper anyway.
Yeah, I mean that will be preparing for a fuller driver paper coming early next year, I believe.
Deb, if we bring it to item 12, I think that's, and then Rob can update us where we are. Yeah, thank you. And Robin, you were next.
Yeah, well, I was Sandra. No, so only have a look through. Usual comprehensive report there, as we've got quite used to with your reports there. And just like to move the recommendations 1 to 7.
Seconded.
Oh, thank you. Any further debate? No? All those in favour? Thank you. So moving on to item 8, and we stay with Ben, who's probably got some more water by now.
Thank you, Chairman and members. So this item is another aspect of your ongoing budget management and monitoring. We procure Somerset Council to manage treasury management on our behalf, and that's undertaken under a service level agreement with them. This, as I've said before, is a very beneficial arrangement to EMPA. Somerset Council sweeps cash between our EMPA bank accounts and the SC bank accounts, which essentially brings the EMPA accounts to zero overnight. Somerset Council then brigades the EMPA sums with Somerset Council balances and other bodies and lends to the cash market. EMPA receives the overall rate earned by Somerset Council investments less than a small administration fee. So from the report you will see the first 6 months of the 24-25 financial year we've earned a total of £84,000 in interest with an administration fee of about just under £800. That compares really well with last year, where at the same point we had about £69,000 in interest. And this equates for this year to a return of 5.25%. Obviously that's going to reduce slightly now the base rate has reduced again. Our average balance has been around 3.2 million in the first 6 months of this year, so a comparative 2.9 million in the prior year. So our overriding principles on this, which is from the local guidance on local authority government investments in England, gives priority to security and liquidity. So the authority's aim is to achieve a yield commensurate with these principles, and the SC arrangement undertakes this for us. So as well as reporting our performance to date, the report also deals with our reporting under the CITFA Prudential Code and CITFA Treasury Management Code, which recommends that members are informed of treasury management activities at least twice annually. So So to undertake this, Section 4 deals with our debt management. I'm pleased to say that we remain debt-free and no intention to become debt-laden at this stage. And Section 5 details our compliance with prudential indicators, which is mostly set at zeros, because we don't have any credit or debt. So what I find really useful actually is in Section 6 is the outlook for the remaining quarters of the year, and also look forwards to future years in terms of forecast interest rates. Really critical when we've got around about a £2 to £3 million balance, and we're still seeing a 3% interest rate projected at the end of March 2027. So that really helps us in terms of meeting our outgoing costs. So at the time of writing the report, this in table 6.4 indicates a forecast 3% interest rate of September 2027. So really that's probably all I'm going to say. In summary, the report complies with the requirements of the SIPA codes. It provides yourselves as members with a summary of the treasury management activities that are undertaken on behalf for the first 6 months of the year. I can confirm, as per the report, that no prudential indicators have been breached, and that a prudent approach has been taken to our investment activities. So I open the floor for questions if you so wish.
Somebody like to move it? We're noting it. Thanks, Robin. Thank you, Mike. I see there's no questions. All those in favour? Thank you very much. Moving on to item 9, which is on risk management.
So only so much more you've got to put my voice for, I'm afraid.
You'll run out of voice.
Thank you, members, again. So item 9, risk management. So risk management is an absolutely essential aspect of our governance framework. It is the responsibility of the authority to oversee risk management and to review those arrangements on an annual basis. Since this report was provided in November 2023, we've undertaken a root and branch review of our risk management activities, and that was undertaken by the team at Devon Assurance Partnership. A suite of training sessions was provided, and that was attended by staff and managers, in a sense to widen the responsibility of risk management in the organisation. It's something that's inherently done, but we weren't very good at kind of explaining that, articulating that, and owning that in the different departments we have. So that suite of the training was undertaken. We've also had our core policy and strategy documents completely rewritten, and they provide as appendices to this report. If I could refer you to section 1.2, this provides our kind of definition of risk management. So it's the identification, measurement, control and financing of those risks which threaten the existence, our assets, our income, or the personnel of an organisation or the services we provide. And this is kind of expounded in section 1.3 in terms of the more specifically what we aim to do in our risk management activities. Sorry. So I just not touched the screen. So there's no issue, no power cut. Sorry. Section 2 provides the key detail on the authority's current position, our mitigating arrangements, key elements of our risk management processes and activities undertaken during the year. It's quite a comprehensive review of those areas. But I'd like to draw members' attention to the 4th and 5th bullet points. These detail the employee-related actions that which have occurred this year. And that's particularly around the personal safety policy, as well as updates to bullying and harassment, particularly sexual harassment, following the new worker protection amendments to the Equality Act 2010, which came to force in 2023, but now effectively in October. So within this report, there are several appendices. Appendix 1 contains our health and safety policy, which has been received an annual update, a refresh. Appendix 2 contains our new risk management policy, alongside our new risk management strategy in Appendix 3, a suite of documents that sit together. Appendix 4 contains our strategic risk register, that's our high-level risks, organisation-wide strategic risks. Alongside this, in Appendix 5, there is a heat map which essentially maps those risks in terms of their scoring of likelihood and impact on us. So obviously the more red in colour, the more potential for impact and likelihood, and the more severity that risk may have on us. So members are asked to note the annual review of risk management has been completed, to approve the health and safety policy in Appendix 1, to approve the new risk management policy and strategy in Appendices 2 and 3, to approve the strategic risk register and the risk heat map in Appendices 4 and 5, and also to note we have undertaken a review of our business continuity and disaster recovery plan, which is a management concern and we review on a regular basis. So I'll be pleased to take any questions on those areas.
Thank you. Now, the training I referred to in Chairman's announcement is linked directly to this. So that's where we've got extra training. So that was quite neatly segued into that. Right, Mandy, I think yours was the first hand I saw.
Thank you. I thought it was a great report actually, and I thought the risk was really well covered, really good read, and I enjoyed reading it. A couple of things to note. Firstly, within policy B1, I read all through it and I was trying to understand whether there's an accident or near miss. It referred through it to say you report to a line manager and then it goes to Health and Safety Welfare Committee, which is held quarterly. What I couldn't understand is in the event there was a near miss, what would be done immediately? Does it go in a book? Is it recorded somewhere? You know, what actually happens with that information sort of right away? So where does the record sit, I guess, which I didn't get through there. And my second question was, well, it wasn't a question, a comment around the risk heat map. Never seen one of those, found it really useful, and I shall be referring that back to our risk at Somerset. No, I found it really helpful actually, because it just gave that overview of where everything sat. I found that really helpful and useful, so thanks very much. Look forward to the training.
Thank you. Just in response to your question, we have a SharePoint slide down a tool which monitors and maintains those any of those activities, and that piece.
It was just where it was captured really, which I didn't see there. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Mike's next.
It's a very comprehensive report. I'd like to move the recommendations, Chair.
Thanks, Dr. Coates. Oh, Andrew.
Just more.
Yeah.
Yes.
Sorry. You know whether you were seconding or what you were doing.
No, I was just a question, Ben. Observation question. Yes, very good that the reports provided. So on a risk management, if anyone's read it and got confused by the idea of a positive risk, I did. It's a bit of nonsense, really. I did a lot of risk management, but the idea of risk is generally a negative. So don't let that confuse people too much. And the idea of the 14 I think is very good, and the likelihood and impact, really good stuff if members get a brief on that. One thing which stands out, which hasn't been highlighted, is we've just talked about how much funding has gone, 50% of project management projects now, but this ought to be explicitly stated that project managers will implement some sort of risk management along these lines, using the 4Ts, and they should have risk workshops and every project. And that's really the main point. Thanks.
Yep, thank you. Can I just come back very briefly on that? So in terms of project managers, they've been fully involved in this risk training, and I suppose an inherent part of these policies, but not explicitly detailed. So very much so. We are looking at several projects at the moment where we need to apply a risk management framework. We've got a useful tool for logging risks as well, which we've had to put in place. And the other point you say about positive risk, I would prefer to rephrase that as opportunity. Yes. So there may be occasions where we may need to take risks to secure something or to improve something in certain areas. So I would probably rephrase that as opportunity rather than positive risk.
Yeah, I agree totally. You look at opportunities and risks, but when you look at the risk register, it's about what risks are going to impact our outcome. There should be opportunities logged over here somewhere else, I think, thing. And of course, the projects that need to be risk issues and risks as well. Issue of something we know is going to happen and the risk of potential. So, but yeah, I agree. Opportunities are really important.
Thank you.
Mandy, you're happy to second? Thank you.
Thank you.
Any more questions? Bill, sorry, I'm so sorry.
Just a comment on wording on page 4, Appendix 2. It says that our meetings are held each quarter. It will be just regular meetings or something. Yeah. It's inaccurate, so it will be on.
Yeah. We can change that. Thank you. Right, see no more hands, unless there's somebody I haven't seen. No. So we've had it proposed and seconded. All those in favour, please. Thank you very much. So moving on now to item 10, and Ben gets a rest, which I'm sure he's very well deserved. Thank you for that. And then Claire's going to have a little swap over with their glasses and things. So this is the National Park Partnership Plan. Claire.
Good morning, members. I can think just good morning still. Right. So I'm very pleased to be able to present to you this morning our National Park Partnership Plan for your approval to go out for consultation. As this is the first time that I've sort of publicly presented the information, I am going to go through a few slides with you. I know you're very aware of this, you've been very involved, but so please just bear with me, but I think it's important that we run through some of the headlines in terms of the plan and what we're wanting to gather people's views on. So, as you're very aware, this is our statutory 5-year management plan for the National Park, the place, but it's something that as a National Park Authority we take lead responsibility in developing and preparing. It sets out the opportunities and challenges facing the National Park. It's aimed at sort of identifying what we need to do to deliver the two statutory purposes for national parks, and for us as an authority our duty in terms of socio-economic well-being. And I think you know, it's important that we see this as a partnership plan, because obviously it is something that's delivered in partnership. So we have a long-term vision and objectives, and also some bold targets in there around partnership action. This is the culmination, well, it's not the culmination, this is an important stage along the way of a very detailed process, and I would just like to thank members and all our partners and staff and everyone who's been involved in getting us to this stage. There's been a lot of work put into it, starting with the detailed evidence base that we gathered, lots of discussions with our partnership groups, workshops, specific focus on particular issues, working with the Next Generation group, etc., and an important public opinion survey, which has been very helpful in giving us an idea of kind of people's views on the different issues that we're investigating. And obviously, you know, being guided by members and the steering group in coming to this point of having a draft for consultation. So the vision is a much shorter vision than we had in our current partnership plan. I think it's quite sort of succinct. It says what it needs to say, and so far anyway, it seems to have gone down very well with people. So you know, we're keen to sort of put that out to wider consultation and see if people feel that we've captured that effectively. We have 7 aims for the plan. And I'll go through those in a moment, but each one is supported by a series of objectives and then more detailed targets. So important just to note before we go through the aims that we have these national protected landscapes targets. These are the ones that we as a national park will need to focus on delivering, so they are our priorities. They're set out, they are what government has set out that they are looking for the protected landscapes to help deliver in terms of the National Environment Improvement Plan, so covering nature, climate, heritage and access and engagement. I'd just like to highlight that we are only consulting on 3 of these national targets, the ones that are highlighted in red, so around the area of priority habitat, the deep peat and the woodland cover. That's because the other ones are sort of standard ones that the government has set for all national parks and protected landscapes. The 3 that we're consulting on are ones that they have asked us to say what we feel we can contribute towards in terms of those national targets. To go through the aims briefly in turn, so the first one is around a cared for landscape and heritage, obviously a very important part of one of our statutory purposes. And I think we've highlighted it is what makes
part of what makes Exmoor special, but there are challenges that we're facing across the landscape character and those heritage assets. Things like, things that we know that are happening, like climate change, which, we're going to have to adapt and change and sort of build resilience to, and also things like the demands of modern living. So we're seeing a lot of increased need for telecommunications, for example, or new building materials and methods, and changing agricultural practices and systems. So I think, again, it's very important up front that the plan highlights that we need to manage all of those things carefully to ensure that these special qualities of landscape and heritage do continue to be protected and conserved. The next aim is around a nature-rich landscape, and I think it's probably important to emphasise that we are much more aware this time round of that sort of wider global nature crisis, and we hear very frequently that being stated that the UK is one of the most depleted nature depleted countries in the world. So that's quite an uncomfortable thing to hear, and perhaps it's something that we maybe jumped ahead. We don't sort of think of. It's determined to move on. I will carry on. We don't necessarily, when we look at Exmoor and see, enjoy the wildlife and habitats that we have in the national park, perhaps it's not so easy to think, about here. But obviously, although Exmoor is in some cases bucking national trends, and we heard recently from the Moorland Bird Survey the really good news that some birds are really thriving on Exmoor, and that's to be celebrated. But I think that doesn't take away from the fact that as a national park we haven't been immune to those wider declines in nature and loss of other species, and many of our priority habitats aren't currently in good condition. So having said that, that is a challenge for us, but I think we are very well placed within the national park to respond to that. We were ahead of the game in a way in terms of having the nature recovery vision that was already approved by members, and so we've really been able to kind of build on that for this partnership plan and the targets that we've set in there. They tie in very closely with the national targets that government has set on nature, so around priority habitats, habitat condition, ensuring favourable management, and also encouraging nature-friendly farming. And the other thing to highlight here is that all of this is helping to contribute towards the kind of global nature pledge that the UK government signed up to, in terms of 30% of land being protected for nature by 2030. And we have a target in our plan again for how we feel Exmoor can contribute to that target. That's 50% of the national park. That is something, again, as part of the consultation we'll be seeking views on, and there have been some recent new guidelines or new criteria released on that, so that's something we'll want to look at as we go through the consultation. The kind of associated with the nature crisis, obviously the climate crisis, and as a national park we have declared a climate emergency. So again, I think it's right this time for this partnership plan we have much more highlighted the response to climate change, both mitigation and adapting to climate change. In the partnership plan, it was always in there, but it was sort of integrated throughout the plan before, and I think it is important that we draw it out as a really key priority for us. We have a science-based target for Exmoor in terms of becoming net zero. This is obviously something that is going to be quite a challenge to achieve, but I think there's a lot that can be done in terms of reducing emissions, and then also providing that sort of carbon sink in terms of looking up carbon in peatlands, trees and soils. I think we've already done a lot in terms of what's needed. So, for example, the work that the South West Peatland Partnership has done in terms of peatland restoration within the national park, but there is more to be done, and we set a specific target on that in terms of our contribution to the national peatland restoration target. We've set a target of around 800 hectares by 2030 and then 80% of peatlands by 2050. The other appropriate target is in relation to trees and woodland cover, increasing that within the national park. This again is one of the ones that we have to sort of set out what we feel Exmoor can contribute to that national target. So we've based this on what we've already, members have already approved in the Nature Recovery Vision, so that's an increase in 3% of the national park area, so that's just over 2,000 hectares by 2030. And then a longer term sort of what I'm calling a stretch target to 2050, and that's to pick up that kind of ongoing nature recovery element, but also responding to climate, the sort of wider climate change targets as well. And I think it's important to stress that this is covering all sorts of tree cover, so it can be individual trees, it can be hedgerow trees, it can be orchards, wood pasture, as well as woodland. So I think that's very important to stress that you know, this is the whole range of different you know, trees in the landscape. And we have done work, the team have done work looking at the opportunities within the national park for that, and the sort of the sensitivities and constraints, just to make sure that, you know, there is capacity for, you know, for that. The next theme is around our sort of our other statutory purpose in helping to promote understanding and enjoyment of the national park, and here we've got 4 objectives that pick up the whole sort of range of things that we're wanting to do. Importantly, about, you know, helping people to be connected with and inspired by and to care for the national park, and there's obviously a much greater understanding now of that, the benefits that brings for people's health and well-being. Excuse me. For this plan, we are highlighting in particular that we really want to have a greater focus on engaging with younger people, because we know that they tend to be underrepresented in terms of people coming to enjoy the national park, but also just to look at removing barriers more generally to those people who perhaps don't feel able to or not able to come and enjoy what Exmoor has to offer. We're highlighting the importance of the tourism sector in terms of, you know, providing those opportunities, and, you know, the special qualities are what attract people to come and visit to Exmoor, but that does bring challenges with it. So we're sort of introducing this idea of regenerative tourism. So this is something that's sort of been developing in the sector for a little while, but it is about trying to ensure that, you know, people come and have a great experience, but they also leave the environment in a better state and positively contribute to the well-being of local communities. So, you know, it's trying to bring those positives out rather than it being seen as a you know, potential impacts. And then underpinning all of that is the sort of the infrastructure that enables people to come and enjoy the national park, so the access and recreation network. So, you know, as we know, as National Park Authority, in terms of our services, you know, this requires a lot of ongoing effort from the team to make sure that it is open and easy to use. And, you know, it's increasingly challenging in the time of sort of budget constraints and also increased pressures. So things like climate change, you know, it impacts across all of our activities, and you know, the impacts of extreme weather, you know, are already being seen. So these are things that, you know, we have to be quite careful in terms of prioritising our work and our resources, but also working with partners and volunteers to ensure that it still is a high quality network. We've got put 2 aims together on one slide here. So we've got one around healthy natural resources. So this is the first time that we've sort of again picked this out as a specific element of the partnership plan. You know, they are obviously fundamental to a lot of what we want to achieve in the plan, both in terms of the climate and nature crisis, but also being essential to people's health and well-being, and a sustainable economy. So I think, you know, it's right that we highlight what we need to do in terms of ensuring our soils, water and air are healthy, and we also, within that, will be helping to contribute to the National Environment Improvement Plan targets again. The second aim here is around Exmoor's communities and economy, so ensuring that it continues to be a great place to do business. So this recognises that the local environment and local economy are very closely connected, and and that we want to sort of continue to ensure that these benefits will be able to adapt to some of the challenges that we're facing. So in terms of resilience and sustainability, supporting that transition to a low carbon economy and lifestyles. And within that, I think a really important part is going to be around the skills and training that will enable people to to benefit from those changes. And then finally, the sort of bringing it all together section, where we have 4 aims focused on the different sort of landscapes within the national park. So trying to, because of all of those previous aims are very interrelated, and we know that they do kind of connect. We've tried to bring it together, looking at our moorlands and farmlands, and again there are interrelationships between those two, so we felt it was important to bring them together. We've got our woodlands and tree cover, we've got our wetlands, rivers and streams, and we've got our coastline. So all of those sections and targets are about looking more specifically at what we want to do to deliver the aims and objectives within those different landscapes. So obviously identifying the vision, aims and objectives and our targets in a way is the easy bit. What's really important is actually how we go about delivering those. And I think the critical task for us now as we go into this consultation phase is to work with our partners to identify what they can do to help deliver the plan. We are very fortunate, again, I think, on Exmoor that we have well-established partnership groups that we can work with and build on. And there are a lot of things that need to kind of underpin that, really. So we obviously need to ensure that we've got the right skills and training to deliver the targets. The fundamental thing is going to be about the funding and resources that are available, and that will require seeking new sources of funding to achieve some of the targets. The partnership plan, and this is something that's brought out in the guidance that Natural England issued recently on management plans, is that these are the places where we need to align all the different plans and policies and projects to ensure that we are all pointing in the same direction in terms of delivering the plan. But we also need to try and do what we can to ensure that it's supported by that appropriate regulation and national legislation and policy. All of those things need to work together. And then, ultimately, all of this really is only going to be delivered by the kind of ongoing dedication and commitment of many different partners, organisations, volunteers, individuals, land managers, in achieving what's set out in the plan. So communication and engagement will continue to be a very important part of what we do going forward. We also need to set up a monitoring framework to track our progress towards delivering the objectives and targets, and again working closely with our partners on doing that. So just finally to say, in terms of the consultation process, we are planning to go out, subject to your approval, in January for a consultation period around 6 to 8 weeks. We will be publicising it widely through our website, through social media. We're proposing that we run the consultation primarily through an online survey. That is, makes it much easier to kind of analyse responses that we get, but we do appreciate that not everybody is able to to respond in that way, so we will make sure that there are alternative formats that they can use. We'll be setting out a sort of a general survey on the aims and objectives, and then a more specific one on the targets for those people who will want to respond. So hopefully there'll be different levels that people, as appropriate to them, to comment on.
We do have to carry out a strategic environmental assessment that tests the plan against a set of sustainability objectives, and also a habitats regulation assessment, which is something that looks at the implications of the plan on our internationally protected sites, so our sites, special areas of conservation. That is being produced at the moment, and the report will be available during the consultation for anyone who wants to comment on that. And then once we've had the consultation, we will obviously review all the comments and responses that we have back. We'll be discussing those with you and with the steering group, and any amendments we need to make to the plan. And our aim is to adopt the plan in summer next year. Thank you very much.
Brilliant, that was really good. Thank you. Dominic?
Thanks. Yeah, no, thanks. It's good to see it again. I suppose it took me a while, even though I've been here for ages, to work out that the partnership plan was the management plan. I just assumed that we had a management plan, and then we had this, which was our plan for partnership, which, if you like, was how we would work with partners to deliver a management plan. It took me ages to work out that, no, we just decided to rename the management plan a partnership plan. And it's a plan, not a strategy. Andrew was talking earlier about different risks and opportunities, and we can get lost in difference in plans and strategies and tactics for a long time. I suppose the issue here is to acknowledge that this plan has objectives and targets and measures. What it doesn't necessarily have is a description of how you get to those targets and measures. And this, I think, is something I said earlier about the nature recovery vision. And we've got a nature recovery vision, which is a vision. Right? That's not a plan how we get to the vision, it's just a vision. And now we've got a partnership plan, which is actually a management plan, but doesn't have a plan for how to get to our vision. So we're still lacking how we get to our vision. I'll take up one example. One thing I like is that we've taken item 5 of the national mandated requirements of ensuring at least 65% to 80% of land managers adopt nature-friendly farming on at least 10 to 15% of their land by 2030, which of course is nonsense. I mean, that would basically mean 10% of your farm is probably your hedgerows and a few areas of scrub, so most farmers get to that already, and basically it means that the other 90% you can do nature-unfriendly farming. So you can be crap to nature on 90% of your farm, and we've met our target. So that's clearly nonsense. Fortunately, we take a different view, and what we've said is that by 2030, nature-friendly farming is practiced on 50% of enclosed farmland, where land is managed working with nature as part of a sustainable farm business. That'll only be 17% of the national park, bear in mind, but, so it's not that much. Sounds a lot, 50% of the enclosed farmland, but of course that's carefully worded to ensure that actually it's not that ambitious. And the trouble is it's a better way of looking at it, because that means we're taking a whole farm view. Each farm needs to be nature-friendly. This has to be the case. Now this, of course, my argument would be this has to be nationally the case, and not just in national parks, but let's at least make sure in national parks that farms are nature-friendly. It is completely bizarre that you'll be in a national park and not be nature-friendly farming, okay? The target should be 100%. But the issue is, and in my language, in social science, what we'd say is, well, where is the theory of change? So a theory of change is basically how we work out how our actions and the actions of other actors, our partners, alter the conditions in such a way that they bring about the desired outcomes. Okay? So this is how we do this in Indonesia when we're talking about, for instance, how we're going to reduce deforestation across, West Papua. All right? What is the theory of change? How do we think behaviours will change? How do we think people will take different decisions? And then how do we think external factors will impact on that, such as climate change? Just as, for instance, the atmospheric load of nitrogen. Now, the increasing load of N in the atmosphere, for instance, from dairy farming, could trash some of our issues here. Some of the things we're trying to do on moorland could get basically messed up by that. What are we going to do about that? What are we doing about invasive species, which is becoming an increasing problem? These are just tiny examples. What are we going to do about the fact that hedge laying is a really important part of our hedge management approach to make sure our hedgerows are nature-friendly, but, oh dear, what's happened? We no longer have capital grants, because DEFRA blew all the money on helping dairy farmers lay more concrete in their farmyards in order to emit more nitrogen, in order to undermine all our nature goals. So it's a system view, and it's bloody complicated. So as a flow chart, this would involve lots of arrows and lots of boxes, lots of feedback loops. It's very difficult to do. But I suppose what I'm saying is I haven't seen us do it yet, okay? And I'm just asking really what the next step is to make sure that we now unite that nature recovery vision, this partnership plan here, and actually, and it's difficult to take the whole lot, it'll blow our minds, but to take bits of it and say, for instance, nature-friendly farming, and go, right, what actual steps over the next 5 years would we need to be doing to bring that about? I hope that makes sense.
Thank you. Yeah, so I think that's alluding to what I was saying about this is only the start, and actually the hard work is now to begin really. So in terms of the plan, the plan is setting out those targets and objectives as you state. The next steps are about working with partners then in terms of the delivery plans underpinning those. So that is the process that we'll be going through during the consultation process and beyond, is actually to identify those delivery plans which will help achieve those targets. We had a really useful session actually that Sarah organised. I mentioned Sarah. with Michael Barber, who was the head of the delivery unit at number 10 during Tony Blair's premiership, and it happens to be a local resident, and it was really he was really helpful in terms of sort of providing that clarity in terms of those steps that are needed to be very focused on delivery, to be very clear around the people involved, who are the key people for delivery, and to just keep coming back to delivery regularly, monitoring progress, seeing what we're achieving, what we're not achieving, why, analysing that, the sort of the theory of change sort of element that you highlighted. So that's the journey that we're embarking on now, basically, is to do that across the plan and with our partners, and recognising that a lot of these things we don't have handles on, we don't control, and we can do what we can locally, but a lot of these other things are going to be dependent on what happens nationally and beyond. So it is a process that will start now that we've got the plan out and ready.
Thank you. Fran was next.
Thank you. It's a very good and very interesting report on this. I just wanted to raise one query on the photographs that you're using. Are they stock photographs? Mainly because for the diversity, the quality diversity, are we giving free advertising to Montclair? Because that was very, very significant in the picture. And if you look at Montclair, because I didn't even know who they were, and when their jackets are £1,300 each, I'm just thinking that, what, I know it's equality for everybody, so we can have rich people as well as poor people on here. But I just think if that wasn't a stock photo, I just wanted to raise that as maybe something that we ought to be blurring out or not using.
And I also noticed that, and I would have no idea how expensive these things were, but my son traipsed me around some shop in Bristol and I nearly fell over as I buy these things. This is not our target audience, to say the least.
No, I think they were. It was a local visit, but yes, probably should have checked in relation to those. Yeah, thank you for raising it. We'll take that back. Yeah.
I think we probably just need to remove the advertising because it looks like we're in some sort of sponsorship deal. But I would never have known if he hadn't pointed out these jackets. They are so expensive. Right, who else have I got? Andrew, you were next.
Right, thank you much. Thank you, Claire, for very thorough document and a lot of very good stuff in here. And I'm very comfortable with the idea that, yes, is this a strategy? Is it telling us how we get here? I'm very comfortable with this is setting the targets what we want to get to. But I guess at this stage, we've got to come to where those targets are right and the impact of what it's going to be like when we get there. And then the delivery plan will tell us how to get there. Couple observations, and then a more specific one of concern I still have. Health and well-being in here in the summary, I think it could be a lot more positive. It refers to COVID straight away, and just a minor thing. I think that's a really big area for the park, so I think that just minor thing could be very positive and the benefits of it. Then moving on to the targets, I was involved in the active travel discussions recently, and I'm involved in the LCN committee tomorrow. And in here about reducing our carbon footprint, it talks about sustainable travel, and it talks about to and from the park. I just wonder, are we intentionally omitting travel within the park? Because what came up during active travel is that we could actually get people to park their cars at the campsites and provide means of transport around Exmoor. So I just wondered if we could drop the to and from and just say reduction in emissions of travel. Because for active travel, I think that's an area we can perhaps get some funding to improve, tracks around campsites and provide e-bikes, park the cars up, hand them in. So I think that's an idea, we could do that. The final one, which is I am more concerned about, I'm very happy to improving tracks and cycling, is the target for, and I know I raised the question at the last session we had, for canopy and woodland cover. I went to the workshop which Graham held back in August, and we talked through the protected landscape targets, target 8, and it was very much we were showing the impact of hitting those targets. But at the time, the target we were talking about was 3% by 2050, which is in line with the landscape targets, and that's what we looked at. And I accept now that we're aiming to do that by 2035, the 3%. But what I'm struggling with, and I'm just again thinking, I'm at the Exmoor Forum on Friday, can I defend, can I understand, I don't understand why we've suddenly gone to 10% by 2050, and in line with national targets. The national target is 3% by 2050, not 10%. Now 10%, that means taking 25% of canopies, tree canopy, and hedges and woodland. I'm not sure we've seen the impact of that, what that actually looks like and what that means. So we had a workshop to discuss that, but we didn't discuss 10%. I've read up on this more, obviously this goes back to mentioning earlier on, small work consulting, and the figure comes from here, I can see that. But that's going quite beyond what we need to do as a park. This is actually trying to reduce our carbon footprint and where we, as a country, we buy stuff overseas, and we're trying to reduce the carbon impact of that. So I sense there's been a sudden jump to that, and I can't explain how we've got there. So again, an excellent forum, I could not explain to people why are we going for 10% when the government target is saying 3%. So that's what I'm struggling with that one. So yeah, just a few general points and just.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks for those points. So, in terms of the travel one, again, we're highlighting travel to and from the national park because that's a really significant part of the carbon footprint. So for visitors, and I think it's right to say at the start that the approach as national park, the family of national parks we've taken on the carbon, footprint is very challenging. It is looking at both consumption and production. It's trying to be more accurate, really, in terms of our real, our real impact, rather than just looking at what's produced within the national park. It's actually looking at what we consume as well, both as residents and visitors. So we are being challenging here in terms of looking at those targets. So the reason that I think it's important to include the travel to and from the national park is that that is quite a significant part of that baseline. And I think the partnership plan is about signalling to our partners, so the highways authorities and tourism partners and so on, that this is something that we need to try and look at and see what we can do to try and reduce those impacts. Obviously, the opportunities for coming to Exmoor, other than by car, are quite limited. Maybe electric vehicles in future will start to provide an alternative. We've got to make sure that we've got the infrastructure in terms of charge points and so on with the national park to be able to support that. But in the shorter term, those opportunities for public transport or alternative modes, we want to try and support and encourage those, but we know those are limited. Absolutely, as you say, once people are in the national park, the focus is on getting people out of their cars and encourage them onto this high quality rights of way and active network that we have. So those two things are part of the two sides of the same coin, really, and the recreation and access objectives will pick up that active travel opportunities as well. So I think it is important that we have both of those in there. So yeah, onto the woodland cover. So the way that we've devised the targets here is that, yeah, they are, in a way, it's bringing two different targets together, but I think they are obviously, linked. One is the nature recovery vision target, which is where the 3% by 2030 comes in. So that is about, about 2,000 hectares. The point I made in the presentation about it covering the whole range of woodland trees, hedgerows, etc. So that's something that was already been approved. So it seemed sensible just to use that as our target. It happens to coincide with the national target. The national target for 3% is obviously 3% of well, if we use the England figures, so 3% of the land area of England is what the government is setting as a target by 2050. So that's, I think, about 250,000 hectares. For the national parks and the protected landscapes, they're looking to us to say what we think we can contribute towards that national figure. And so I think it's sort of what the approach that we've taken is that if we're already achieving 3% by 2030, we don't want to just stop there. Why would we? If this is something that's generally positive in relation to nature and climate and well-being and access and health and all the rest of it, and there are opportunities in the national park to go beyond that, then why shouldn't we be seeking to do that? And obviously, in doing so, we are helping contribute to a wider national target, both in terms of climate and more widely in relation to nature. The carbon figures and the Small World Consulting report that you reference, again, is setting out what we need to do in relation to the national park and getting to net zero by 2038. If we were to, so it's a science-based target. It follows the Climate Change Committee's recommendations for the UK to get to net zero and beyond. What it's saying is, as a national park, or as a family of national parks, we might need to go further in terms of doing some of that, providing the opportunities for being carbon sinks, because you won't necessarily be able. It's not sort of like apportioning it pro rata to each area. Some areas might have to do more because others aren't able to. They just don't have the opportunities to do that. So that's why the Small World Consulting report is saying, if we look collectively at what we need to do as a nation, it's much, we need to go above and beyond what we would just look at for our own little area. And that's why we're proposing that as a stretch target. And again, I've sort of highlighted it is challenging. And ultimately, with all of these targets, it will depend on what landowners want to do. None of this, we can't compel anyone to do any of this. But what we're seeking to do is to sort of set out the ambition that if we're to meet these challenges of climate and nature, and we have declared a climate emergency, we accept there's a nature crisis as well, then these are the sorts of things that we should be looking to try and achieve. So that's what we want to. We want to put it out there. It's consultation. We want to see what people's views are coming back, and having achieved the 3%, if we were to achieve 3% by 2030, which in itself is quite a challenging target, by 2050 that's another 20 years. Kind of another 6% on top of that, another 3% in 10 years, another 3% in 10 years. Didn't feel like that was a unreasonable sort of target to perhaps aim for. So hopefully that sort of explains a little bit some of the thinking behind why we're proposing that.
Yeah, thanks for that. Can I just come back?
Yeah.
And I take your point about to and from and a far bigger impact on the carbon than travel here. What I feel I can't explain to anyone is what that's going to look like, that 10%. And I feel perhaps we're going to consult. Some of the images we saw, we thought, don't show people that, and we agreed not to. If we're going to have a stretch target, we need to show people what 10% will look like, and I think we have a clear view. Because, in one sense, part of the document you say what's special at Exmoor, and what's special at Exmoor is the landscape, how it looks. What this is doing, this is going to change how Exmoor will look, and I think we need to be very careful of that, because we're going way ahead of the government target. But actually, what's the impact on Exmoor? I don't sense, as a member, I've seen that. So I think that parallel with this, we could show what does 10% look like.
Can I just respond? I mean, I understand your point. I think it would be quite difficult for us to be able to show it, partly because, as I said, it's going to be, it's not saying it's 10% increase in woodland, and I think that's what people immediately assume and perhaps react to and think, oh, you know, we're going to increase it. That's not the case. So you've seen examples that Graham's shown of sort of visualisations of more scattered trees in the combes or up the valley sides. Mentioned wood pasture might be another one where actually from a farming perspective, they might want to start increasing shelter and more trees and hedgerows or more trees on the farm to provide shelter and fodder and the rest of it in future in relation to climate change. So I think it's not something that we can plan and say this is what it will look like. We can give examples, and we can certainly do that in part of the consultation in relation to those visualisations, that these are some examples of how some of this might be achieved. And it could be expanding existing woodlands. We know from the public opinion survey that the wooded valleys actually came out top of the special qualities, and 88% of people supported more broadly trees and woodlands in the national park. So those are also things that we can share. But it would sort of be inappropriate for us to say this is how it's going to look, because we can't say what's going to happen where, but we could give some examples and some illustrations of the different ways that could be achieved, if that's helpful.
Thank you. It's one of my questions around tree, but really it's the words we use, because if you talk tree canopy, people immediately think of a forest and lots of trees, as opposed to individual trees sort of dispersed. So I think it's being really careful about where we use canopy, because we might not mean a full canopy. And I think that's what people will visualise and imagine it is. So I think it's really important. The other thing for me is thinking more and more. I think national parks will become more of a focus as we move forward, because I think it can tick so many boxes for the country as a whole, whether it's open spaces, health and well-being. I think there'll be a lot more focus. I hope some more money comes with that. But when I look, one of the distinctive points of the park is open moorlands. And for me, it's making sure that in planting lots of trees, you don't lose somehow that other distinctive element, i.e. the open moorlands. And we heard about the moorland birds. They need that open moorland. So if we put lots of trees in, will it affect? And for me, it's that cause and effect. Are you going to do one thing in the park that then affects something else? And I think that balance and how those plans, as you said, work together, I think that will be a challenge. When you set a target, it should be achievable, and you should know how you're going to get there. And I think that's the missing for me around, especially with the trees. What are you going to do? How are you going to get to that target? And I think that'll be challenging. Pick up again on the health and well-being. For me, that should be more of a major part of the plan. I think if we look at things like social prescribing, for example, there's more and more social prescribing, trying to get people out, getting fresh air, walking, lots of pluses with it. So I think we could probably, for want of a better word, beef up that health and well-being element of the plan. And that was my comment.
Right, I'm going to take a few. Well, can I just remind members, this is about us making a decision to go out to consultation, and it's going to come back. So it's sort of, we don't really need to sort of stress it out by line. Robin, briefly, please.
Right. Well, first of all, I'll move to recommendations.
Thank you.
And just a few comments. One around trees is just, well, the first one was really to reiterate what Andrea said, sorry. And that was actually, this is a consultation. We're not expecting this to go out. I mean, not in my mind, I wouldn't expect it to go out as a perfect document that everybody's going to look at and say, yay, that's great, I agree with everything in it. I'm expecting it's going to cause some controversy, some discussion, and actually, that's the expectation, that in a consultation you'll get that stuff back and and it can be looked at. And again, just, for example, the stuff around the trees that highlighted Andrew, and the difference in cover. Well, in reality, I do believe there's a relatively recent survey done on hedgerows on Exmoor that discovered there's nearly twice as many as we thought. Well, if you take canopy cover of them, then quite potentially you've dealt with that objective just on that, Andrew. You may have done it. Hedgerows. As easy as that. We don't know. So also there's existing woodland improvement, and some of that's in quite poor condition and has been abandoned for several years. There's an awful lot of opportunity there. And I think maybe, however that works. The other bit we've got to be seeing is there are two bits to this in some ways. There's what our partners do, or those people that actually own and manage most of it. And then there's the stuff that we actually own ourselves, and we can have a direct influence. And I think it's really important that actually we're seen to lead by example on what we do. And unless we do that, you can't sort of tell people do as I say, not as I do. So I think there's a really definite part within that one. And we're quite good at that. We've got a discussion later on the future driver. That's going to be quite key, as well as the Pioneer project work, the landscape recovery stuff, all the stuff that Rob has been involved in, that land management stuff. Absolutely key to say this is what we're doing. So and giving people to join with us and operate on that. There will be challenges from the public, undoubtedly, on some of it. Absolutely expect there to be, and from some of the land managers. Just on the thought, direction of travel is going to be largely determined by the political framework and by what DEFRA come out with, and as Dominic actually mentioned, around what sort of supports. Just recently, only this week, DEFRA's effectively a new stakeholder forum looking at how in the uplands these sort of policies are going to be implemented, because they suddenly realised they hadn't really thought about some of that. Rather frustrating to me, and I did bring it up at the time. There was quite a considerable group of stakeholders there, but there was absolutely no representation from the national parks at all. Nobody, apart from me. And I don't know, I wasn't there as a national park person, but I did remind them. So I think if we're going to, this is part of the expectation from DEFRA, we've got to make sure we're part of those discussions as well to help contribute to it. So, apart from that, thank you.
Thanks, Robin. Mike, you are next.
Well, very quickly, Chair, it's only a consultation. We've not got anything in. We're not going to be planting conifers on the chains again, are we, or raising that spectre? So it's a journey that we're going to be going through. So and there's nothing wrong with being ambitious about our targets. We are setting an example. But we've got to see it in the wider context rather than just the national park itself. So again, that's part of that consultation process. Good points made by Dominic in terms of delivery. I think if we start looking at 2.3, which looks at the aims, and then it says supporting text to be added to accompany each aim, providing the context for the objectives, targets, measures and delivery, that might be quite helpful. And maybe identifying actors for change, but barriers to change as well. So I think there's an opportunity perhaps to look at that in particular, which may be useful. Otherwise, there was a specific point about the second recommendation, delegating to the Chief Exec to make final amendments to the consultation draft plan. At what point is that, and what do we mean by final amendments? Otherwise, very happy to second the recommendations.
Well, one of the amendments is going to get rid of those Montclair things on people's T-shirts. That's already on the list, the chairperson has said. Susan, I'm going to keep going through because we are running quite a lot behind. You are very good, thank you. Jeremy, you're last.
Real naughty. Thank you. I'm a little bit concerned listening to Andrew. And you haven't said anything wrong. There's nothing wrong anywhere. But why wasn't that group reconsulted then for this change, so that Andrew wasn't in a position where he's had to come and to wait till this meeting where you want us to make the decision to go out to the public, and you want to spend half an hour explaining to him this change, which I think is fundamental perhaps. Maybe, yes, absolutely right, but why didn't that group know about it before we got to this meeting? So what are we sat here for? That's my question. What are we sat here for? sorry, I just was alarmed, right? And it's not the first time it's happened. I do completely agree with my colleague here. Delivery, how are we going to deliver it? The detail, the gremlins are always in the detail. The Chairman and I are dealing with a highways issue at the moment, and strategic thinking, you've got to have it. But when you come to implementation, you get caught up in the little detail, which causes trouble. I just, sitting here listening, it's always great, absolutely right over here. I just felt uncomfortable because you weren't comfortable about being able to explain why it was moved. It's only a little thing, but maybe it's going to happen with bigger things. And we sat here in this discomfort place, the change of government, where every farmer is now going to have to be far more aggressively commercial to ensure that they can pass their business on. They're already ignoring everything we're talking about, largely, and I'm very uncomfortable about the whole thing, because it makes it so much more difficult for us. I'll leave it there, Chairman.
I'm just going to remind again that we are going out to consultation on the draft, and as Robin has also said, let's hope that people do bother to respond, and that's the sort of point that we would hope to come back. Susan?
Really briefly on the delivery, I mean, I'm a great into theory of change, all that kind of stuff. However, this is a partnership plan, and it sets out aims, and it's, that's its purpose, is to set out, direction of travel, clear aims and context. You cannot, in this kind of document, what you then see separate to that is what I would call an operational delivery plan, and that's going to be our own internal operational plan. It's going to be all our partners as well, and collectively that is what then shows us about how we're going to do what we do. I had an incident recently where I wrote just recently for a few people, wrote a whole business plan for them, and they said to me, but how are we actually going to do it on the ground? I said, this isn't the point of that document. This is to set out the aims, the objectives, what we're going to do, when we're going to do it by, and how we're going to evaluate and monitor. The next job will be, when we get the money, is to then do the operational delivery plan of how we will then deliver, and actually affect this, change on the ground. So I think this document cannot be all things to all people, and it can't do that. It needs to be part of it, and it needs to happen, but I think it's that's a separate document, really. You can't put it all into one, and if you had all your partners, you said to one of your partners...
It's non-verbal communication.
Yeah. I don't think it can be all in one thing. I think it has to happen, and they have to link together, but you cannot have a document and have every single person's, partners and ours, how we're going to deliver every single different thing in the park in that period. I just don't think it's
I'm going to interlink it in here,
Sorry,
because
that's my
I'm
thought.
the chairman, I can do it occasionally. So I'm just going to say that is absolutely true, and I'm going to speak on behalf of both the transport authorities. We couldn't possibly sign up to anything. We have no idea what our budget's going to be in the future, going back to the point about getting in and out of the park. So I'm just going to say that. I'm going to move to Claire, because we are running severely over time now. Claire, can you answer questions briefly, please?
There's brief questions then. So yes, in terms of that delivery plan, absolutely, that's how we've always found it, is that it needs to be a sort of like a living document, living process, and we work with our partnership group. So, but thank you for all of the comments on that. The question about why the group was not consulted, I'm not quite sure on what you're getting at there, Jeremy. I mean, basically the Small World Consulting report was something that was one of the webinars that we had on the climate carbon baseline. So that was the information. I think Andrew were you referring to the National Park Forum where there was a discussion on this? So Graham, we had an internal workshop on that, and I think following all of that, this is where we're pulling it all together and bringing it, to you as the draft for consultation. And then just finally on Mike's point about the recommendation and delegation. So this was partly just to enable, if there were any changes that we needed to make following member discussions, that Sarah and Andrea would have the final sign off of that. I don't think there are. But also the fact that, apologies from me, I didn't manage to quite get the supporting text finalised in time for it to come out to you. It is now drafted. We're just sort of finessing that now, but it was really just to cover that off in terms of, Sarah and in consultation with the chairman, just to to sign that off. Thank you.
Right, well, we have a proposer. Did we have a second? I can't remember. Mike Stevens. Mike, it was Mike, wasn't it? Oh, Stephen. Who have you written down? Sorry. I am so hungry that I think... Right, thank you. Right, all those in favour? Unanimous. Thank you. Thank you very much. Right, we're moving on to item 11, which is progress implementing the corporate plan 24 to 25. No, you'll have no. I'm sorry. We're having lunch after this item. After this item. Yes. Thank you. I'm reassured. My stomach is telling me that it needs to be now. No, I can't. I'm so hungry. It's ridiculous. I'm so hungry. I should eat more breakfast. Chief Executive.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be fairly brief, if I can, as I am holding you all from lunch. So this is the regular update that we do on the corporate plan, and we talk quite a lot about what's the delivery mechanism for the partnership plan. Well, this is obviously part of it. So this is what we do as the National Park Authority each year to help deliver that partnership plan. And you'll remember that we drafted a 3-year strategy. We're partway through it now, so this is a report against the first half of 2024-5. Pleased to say really good progress. The great majority of the targets are on course or have already been met. There's a few you can see that are amber or red in the appendix, and I had a look through at those, and there's nothing there that sort of is alarming, I don't think. I'll quickly go through those. Target 8 was about an idea we had about nature recovery proposals on the coast. We're now looking at an alternative funding mechanism on that through lottery. Target 15 was a South West Water decision, really not ours, to move some of their priorities onto Bodmin and Dartmoor, so out of our hands. Target 19B was Woodland Carbon Toolkit. That literally relates to capacity in the woodland team. They have been absolutely flat out, and this has not been a priority, but we will be reviewing that target to see whether we do continue with it or not. The next one's also commissioning the climate adaptation and risk assessment. I have to say, some of our staff, particularly some of our leadership team, take on an enormous amount of work. We don't have anyone specifically doing climate, and Claire's had to pick it up amongst everything else. We are now currently recruiting a short-term post, which is going to help give us a bit of capacity both in finance and climate assessment, so that's good. The next one, Target 25, was about visitor spend. Obviously, it wasn't a great summer. It never stopped raining. We didn't see as many visitors as we hoped, so that was, again, out of our hands. Target 36, visitor survey, bit of a delay, but not too worried about that one. We're going to pick it up in the spring. And likewise, some of the work on heritage sites we're picking up through the Pioneers project. I'm pleased to report Target 52 local list is actually now complete, and we're just waiting for sign-off. So while there's a few ambers and reds in there, I don't think there's anything to be too concerned about. But what I would like to draw your attention to is some of the big success stories, our big cross-cutting actions in that sort of green list. Partnership plan now back on track, ready to go out for consultation. Thank you for that, all your work on that. Very good news, obviously, on things like Pioneers. Secured the funding for that, and we're going live in the new year with the Pioneers project. FIPL's going really well. Huge amount of money gone out into the farming community, supporting all sorts of projects around FIPL. Ben earlier talked about our big target around income generation and external project funding. We've talked about that quite a bit. And I think for the first time, we're now running at about 50-50 on external funding and core grant, which is the first time we've ever been anywhere near that. So that's very good news. The big project, the Landscape Recovery Project, not an easy one, but it's going reasonably well. Pleased to see progress there. And we're going to be hearing about Driver later. But just over the page, there's a couple others I wanted to draw your attention to, which I'm particularly proud of. The Coast Path, we had a lovely event when I met Michael Barber. Back in the summer, opening the All England Coast Path. That was a great event. Also, a sort of smaller one that's a bit more under the radar, you'll have seen we've had lots of discussion, haven't we, about the difficulties of charging in our car parks and improvements and so on. But all those projects have now happened, the charging's in, things have calmed down a bit, hopefully, and we're seeing a steady income stream, so that's good. And the Access team also, as if they haven't got enough else to do, managed to build that bridge, Great Bradley Bridge, which was our big celebration, so that was really good. Dark Skies continues, another really, really good festival this year I wanted to mention, and also the work of Rural Enterprise Exmoor. We had a really super event a couple of weeks ago over at Lynmouth, celebrating all the amazingly diverse businesses that seem to be, springing up on Exmoor, which is really good to see. I want to mention the planners. Planners have been doing an amazing job. We're now over 90% on within our target of getting things through. So we've seen a real uplift in activity and performance in that team, which is great to see. And I couldn't turn over without also mentioning the woodland team, who continue to do an amazing job managing our woodland estate, which those of you who know our woodlands and know Graham and team know what a great job they're doing. And a final thanks to Caro and the comms team. I've never seen so much going out in the media as I think I have in the last few months on all sorts of things. You can't pick up Facebook or the press without seeing great stories going out. So I think it shows what a great job the team are doing in, ongoing, quite difficult circumstances. But despite all that, I think they've done a great job. Thank you. So move the recommendation.
I don't think you...
No, I can't do
that.
Somebody could move it, I'd be very
I think Stephen's about
Any
to do it,
questions?
but I just want to... can we just... Sorry. I wasn't expecting it to finish quite so quickly.
Sorry.
I think I'd like to add a recommendation that we thank the staff for the progress, please.
Yes.
So that's the third recommendation. Stephen, you're just about
Well,
to...
I was merely going to say, Madam Chairman, that one doesn't ever wish to be complacent at all, and there are always things that one could do perhaps theoretically better, but I think we shouldn't just note the progress in implementing, we should celebrate the progress in implementing this. I welcome very much this report. I thank the Chief Executive very much for having presented it so succinctly and drawing our attention to the points where perhaps there is some variance from what we hope to achieve, but nevertheless perfectly understood why so far we haven't, but I'm sure we will. And I would formally like to move the recommendations, including the delegation under item 2 for further monitoring. And I would like to add your third point, which is to congratulate everybody involved.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Mike, the other one. Mike Hadcock, thank you. And are there any questions or anything you'd like to ask Chief Executive? Oh, you are so good. Mine, no, maybe not completely.
Personally, I'm amazed at what has been achieved. I think when you looked at this at the beginning of the year, to me, I thought, how are you possibly going to do that? So you've exceeded my expectations. So I thought it was a big ask at the beginning of the year, given the resource and the pressure. So yeah, absolutely amazed, and I know behind it is a huge amount of effort and people that I have no doubt will have gone above and beyond. So thank you.
So we've proposed and seconded. All those in favour, please. And that's unanimous, Carol. Right, it's my great pleasure to tell you that you now have until 1:30. Right, item 12, update on driver. Over to you.
Well, it's almost exactly a year since we brought a paper to you, laying out what we wanted to do at Driver and asking for your consent to retain Driver. And what I would like to do today, you've got a paper in front of you which I don't propose to go through. What I'd like to do is give a presentation which really pulls out some of the main points in that. And at the end of it, to look forward into 2025 and where we'll go in 2025. I've got Andrew Laws and Tom Thurlow here who can answer specific questions at the end on any of the items within the paper. But what I'm going to do is just run through a series of slides which sort of take you out there in a sense, just give you a sense of what is going on the ground there. And I think the reason for this paper is, apart from just updating you, was that as a team we were reflecting on how much things have changed in 12 months in terms of not just driver, but in terms of the context that we're making the decisions in. So we put a lot of things in the paper this time last year, which were wishes, if you like. There were an element of funding bids. We hadn't got the money. And you'll see that things have changed a lot. So it seems like a really sensible thing to go through this in quite a bit of detail this morning or this afternoon. You know where driver is, and you know all about it. We've had a series of workshops and we've had a site visit as well, so I won't say anything more on that. But I just want to do some visual reminders for you so that you just to bring you into the space, if you like. Historic farmstead built in 1847. And carved out of moorland at the time. Built as a dairy farm and obviously a sort of mixed enterprise thereafter. The farmhouse sits at 1,200 feet above sea level, surrounded by a very complete range of traditional farm buildings that are contemporary with it, so the whole lot built in 1847, and then a very large and incredibly dilapidated modern farm building at the front, with an out-of-use silage clamp in front of it. I'm going to refer to the building, so I'm just going to put a plan in front of you just to familiarise you with what we've got here. We're going to be talking about the house and the east barn mainly, and won't talk about the west range very much today at all, and I've already said they're traditional buildings. But the east barn is what I want to begin with, and that is the one sort of in the foreground, the long L-shaped building, that one, and I've described it as a conservation project, so I'll go into that now. All of the farm buildings have had a lack of investment over the years. When Somerset County Council owned them, there were repairs done, and I would describe them as unsympathetic but honest repairs at the time, and they are certainly the reason why the building still stands. And these are not listed buildings, but historically they are an important group, and they represent that period when Exmoor Forest was being farmed, and the aspiration to create a series of farms across it. Very poor condition buildings. Even the 1960s repairs have collapsed, so we were faced with wanting to do something with it. Tom Thurlow was successful in securing money from the FIPL, but not our FIPL as it were, the national pot of FIPL funding, Farming in Protected Landscapes, and secured something in the region of £90,000. And I think we're one of only 4 projects on Exmoor that are being progressed under that scheme. It's a very short time frame. We were very lucky in that this building had already had the various ecological surveys and things we would have needed to do anyway before we knew about the grant pot, so we were able to take advantage of that. And I'm not sure what the total cost might be wrong actually, Tom. I think it's pretty high, isn't it?
Across the national park, about 400,000.
So the building works there have comprised stabilising the structure, making repairs to the structure, re-roofing, removing the asbestos sheeting that was on it and replacing it with corrugated iron, and works to the roof trusses. It's a substantial building and has a lot of complex issues with it, which we've been lucky enough to get the funding to deal with. And that work is ongoing, and it will be hopefully completed by the end of March, which is when the funding ends. Give you a sense of the scale of it and the complexity of the work involved and the condition of those buildings. Moving on to the house, one of the main things we discussed with you last December was the refurbishment of the farmhouse, and that work is dependent on land sales funding. We have received now capital receipt from land sales, and that came in last month, or rather October, just into December. So we've only just had the funding available to progress the house. It's worth saying, I mean, I've given you the contract, I can't resist a historic photograph like that one, which came to light actually this year, and you can see how little has changed there in 100 years, which is one way of looking at the place, I think. It is remarkably unaltered as a historic farm building. And I put that down to the hand of public bodies in the second half of the 20th century, not spending money inappropriately. Yeah. So just to give you a feel for it, we've produced a specification for the refurbishment of the house, and we have paused on. We've been unable to progress it until we had the capital receipt from land sales. Now that's in place, we can look at taking it forward with procurement of the refurbishment works, hopefully beginning this month, if not in January, and we will then aim to have the works procured and run it over the summer and into the autumn of next year. So we're looking at a completion date probably for the refurbishment towards the end of 2025. And I don't want to go into detail of this, but just concentrate on the text in the middle. The idea, there's a limit with this building in terms of how you could change it sympathetically. The layout is a very good one, so what we're looking at is adapting it to in a sense, bring in some more flexibility into the structure, so that so it's not a listed building, but we're treating it as such pretty well. So downstairs, the space will be slightly reordered so that it is enabled to be divided up, basically. You can actually split it into two spaces if you are letting out parts of the house and parts of the bedrooms as well, that you can actually bring, you can have privacy for a family there, but also you can have some of the house let out to other people on a sort of holiday let or whatever is planned there. If that's not what's proposed for it, then it works as one building. So it's a large house. It was 6 bedrooms. And just going to the upstairs, you will see that there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 spaces there. It's actually 6 bedrooms, and what we'll end up with there is 5 bedrooms, 3 of which will be en suite, but it could be separated again into 2 halves. There's a lot of, it's refurbishment, I would say. It's a substantial refurbishment and a sort of upgrade, which I think reflects the lack of investment there over the last 30 years and longer than that. The other thing we discussed with you last December, and we held a follow-up workshop with you in August, was about the operating model for Driver, in other words, how it will work. And I just want to say a little bit about that. We outlined 2 options, and we weren't asking for a decision on that at all. The 2 options were an in-house model where we kept entire control of Driver, and another extreme option at the other end of the extreme, if you like, which was we completely stepped back from Driver and let it out on a farm business tenancy and had very little involvement there, which was the case before the farm came back in hand. What we put to you in August was the suggestion of a partnership operating model, so a sort of a hybrid. None of you liked hybrid, and I don't think we do either. So it's a partnership operating model by which we deliberately partner up. So we have a stake in it, but we know we can't do all of it. I don't want to go around the workshop again today. We've also, as you'd expect us to do as a team, we've run a risk analysis on the whole enterprise at Driver. By far the largest risk element is the partnership itself. Getting the right person, and even if you get the right person or people, that they stay on track with you. We've got to be very clear about what we want up there, and we've got to be very clear about what they would offer. We had hoped to bring you a paper today on that, if I'm brutally honest. We're not in a position to do it, because we think we need a bit more time. So what we'd like to do is bring it back to you as probably in a workshop format in March, to show you how our ideas are developing. And then I would imagine a follow-up paper in May. So I'm starting to look forward into 2025, but it's very important because how we run this partnership, what it looks like, in a sense, is the nub of the whole enterprise up there, and we have to get it right. It sounds like we're not quite there yet. the context of this where we are now is that we don't have to make a decision on a partnership now. We've got time, and the reason for that, there are two reasons that really bear strongly on this. One is that the landscape recovery scheme, which I'll come on to in a minute, we won't know what that looks like until the middle of 2026, and it may be after that. So we don't know what funding will be available for Driver. We can all guess, and we'll all have different views, some more informed than others, but we don't actually know. And it's very hard to envisage a partnership and look at the financial model that will support that when we don't know what landscape recovery will look like. So that's one of the key things in this. And the other is that the house itself won't be refurbished until the end of this year. So we're not in a rush to make a decision about the partnership.
This year or next year?
Sorry? Sorry, the end of next year. Yeah. Yeah. I've already jumped forward. Sorry. Thank you. We've been encouraged by yourselves and through our own endeavours to look at comparator sites for Driver, and it's very difficult. I think we've looked at 18 with some seriousness, and very often they're trusts or charities. We're a public body, so we're in a different position. We're in a different a different position in all kinds of ways, which I'll come on to. And it is and also Driver is in a very remote location and is, there's that word, isn't there? Very unique. No, it's just unique. And it's very hard to find comparators. So we're drawing from some of them, and we want more time on that. Just to remind you, when we came to you in August, one of the things we were very clear on is what, at a very high level, Driver was for, and we shared the bubbles diagram, as we call it, with you. So when we're in this process, it's very good sometimes to simplify it and go right back to the first principles. What's Driver for? Well, for us, it is for nature and people. Now that's very high level, isn't it? There are a whole load of other things that play in it, but it is for nature and people. So when we think about the operating model, we're thinking of an operating model that in sense serves this diagram. And that's what we've got to keep in mind, and that's what we want a bit more time on. Throughout 2024, there are other things that we've been doing up there. We've progressed the Countryside Stewardship Scheme, that is an ambitious scheme, and it's now in the delivery phase. So we're we have grazing licence up there, we've had hay cut this year, a whole series of initiatives going on. We've also commissioned a feasibility study on the adaptation of the farm buildings. Now, you wouldn't be surprised for me to say that these are an exceptional resource. They're also an enormous liability, but let's join the two together. They are a liability, they are incredibly important historically, and they are a resource for us. And whatever we plan at Driver, they should serve that ambition. So we've commissioned a feasibility study. I've actually had a draft literally come in this morning. And so I'm not in a position to share that with you, and we've got a bit more work to do with the contractor on it. But that will help us as well. So that will come in January, that report, hopefully. And the other thing, the largest thing that's changed in a sense over the last 12 months is the funding situation. So a lot of things we talked to you about last year were not actually there. So since December of last year, we've secured 1.25 million from the lottery. Exmoor Pioneers programme, you know about that. And we only really got confirmation of that funding in September. We're in recruitment for the posts that will deliver the programme, and quite a lot of the activity will be at Driver, and it will begin next year. So I anticipate by the spring, late spring, summer, we will be beginning to deliver nature projects up there. We'll be delivering engagement and activities up there. So things will start happening at Driver through next year as a result of that funding. So that funding is real now. The other thing that's changed is that after early in 2024, so right at the very beginning of the year, we got confirmation from DEFRA that we've been successful. Alex Farris had done the bid into the landscape recovery scheme, and that development phase for that scheme began in April 2024. And the scheme is focused on the Royal Forest area of Exmoor, but it also has spilled out over that, and rightly so, and it now runs to about 30,000 acres. I've put a red star on it to show you where Driver is. Driver is right in the scheme, and so is a lot of our estate, that's in pale blue there, stretching away across the chains and as far as Loughborough Gate at the east. So all of our land in the forest, or most of our land in the former Royal Forest of Exmoor, will be in landscape recovery. This is potentially a game changer for us in terms of what we might be able to do up there, in terms of progressing the nature recovery vision and the funding to go with it. So it's huge. We've also done a lot of, well, you'd expect us to, wouldn't you? We've done a lot of thinking about the place, the layout, how it all works together, how it serves the bubbles diagram in terms of the layout, what we want from it. And we're in the hands of Julie Lizelle, the landscape officer, who's been doing that and working with us on that. You know, how do we bring people into a place like this and still keep its special qualities? How do we make it work better for nature, etc., etc. So again, I don't want to go into detail today, but just to share with you the sort of work we're doing. And you know, some of it is sketches. It starts to show how we're thinking. You know, removal of the modern farm building. Will we need a farm building in the future? Obviously, that's all subject to planning and everything else. Where might it sit? So all the ingredients of what Driver might need and what it might look like are captured within that. And they're evolving, those diagrams. They're works in progress. So we're not going to. I'm going to try not to go into them in detail. And then the other thing, which is the bit that I'm conscious some of you see because you get involved in things, and some of you won't see. You know, it's just the input from our own staff and from volunteers all through 2024 on the ground. So a whole range of things going on out there, and I'll list some of them out in a minute. But I just wanted to give you some visuals on what's been happening out there, and done some things that might surprise you, some things that might surprise you less. A whole sort of the land at Driver encompasses and sort of runs round Pinkery, so it's not surprising that now it's back in hand, all that land. Pinkery and the staff at Pinkery are able to make much more use of the land for educational activity. So we've got loads of stuff going on there from Pinkery, which is really, really great to see, some of it illustrated on the right there. We've done guided walks over Driver this year. There's been an Exmoor Society visit. The Hill Farm Network directors came out. There was a presentation at the Exmoor Society AGM. We've done Meadows Days under our Sow the Seeds project, and there's been a sustained website and social media presence, thanks to Caro, and Sarah alluded to that this morning. Having said that, we have deliberately kept fairly low profile this year. The reasoning, I think, is that we didn't have much to say. We wanted to keep down. Next year, the profile will be raised. So as from January, there will be a sustained comms plan which seeks to raise the profile of Driver. And that is as a prelude, in a sense, to pioneers, to landscape recovery, but it's also a prelude to the fact that we'll be looking to recruit a partner probably in 2026, subject to what we talked to you about in March. I think, one of the things I was encouraged to do by Mr. Bray was some strategy mapping, and so I've tried to do something which around strategy mapping, which in a sense relates Driver to the various things that we should be relating it to put it very simply. So on the left, our purpose is state strategy, which you agreed 18 months ago, I think it was. Our own customers, our stakeholders, if you like, ourselves as an organisation, this organisation, the financial side and the legal and compliance side. And I found it really helpful to do it at quite a high level, which I think this is what it's for. So in terms of our purposes, it's very much about nature and people, goes back to the bubbles diagram, and about landscape. In terms of our estate strategy, if you remember, an exemplar, innovative, leading the way, those were the kind of words we were using in our mission statement. And absolute, does driver do those things? It jolly well should. So it should be an exemplar, it should be innovative, and it should lead the way. And who's it for? Well, new audiences, which we're DEFRA, this is a priority for us. Existing audiences, and a learning environment, and a skills environment. DEFRA are very clear on that. And in terms of this organisation, there's a huge buy-in from the team. So it is very much about team working, and I've seen great crossovers of team working there going on, and it's really, really great to see. And it is also a learning environment for us as an organisation. So we've got people who will, in a sense, are going through a bit of stretch there and trying different things. So it's definitely skills development. We always said with Driver we protect the core grant, so we're expecting it to wash its face, and that will take us back to the partnership model that we have. It has to wash its own face, and it has to be sustainable. And we've talked often in this room about that word and what it means, but it has to be sustainable. It has to be able to go forward. I'm very clear with the team. It's not a project driver. It's a thing that doesn't have an end. There may be projects in it, but it's not a project. It's not begin and end. This is something that sets a direction for us. And the important bits at the bottom, it has to operate legally, which is a challenge in some areas, challenge for all of us, and it also must challenge the norms. It's not good enough just to accept things. If we can challenge, even compliance, if we can challenge all that and say, is that right, actually? I think. So just to round up, very, very simply, high level, in the last 12 months, countryside stewardship scheme in place. We have developed options on the energy system, and you've got a bit more on that in the paper. Refurbishment of the farmhouse, we're ready to go on procurement for that. Sow the seeds, lots of meadow restoration work underway up there. Fifth funding for the East Barn secured, and we've nearly completed it. Exmoor Pioneers, in October 2024, 1.25 million secured. Landscape recovery, April 2024, 700,000 secured. A landscape plan in evolution, and feasibility study on the use of the traditional buildings nearing completion. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Members, over to you. So, questions. I'm sure there's going to be some.
Can I do a really little one? If you turn your microphone. It's a really, really little one. I am. It's so good to hear. Really fantastic. My tiny question is that god-awful staircase, which is practically a ladder, is not changing, is it? Or is it?
No, it's not. With you, I'm not going to put you on the spot, Tom, unless you want to be put on the spot. We are going to put a second staircase in that was there originally. So there were two staircases.
That staircase is...
It doesn't make the initial one better.
Death trap.
Oh, yeah. Why would we give you?
Because we're trying to keep the historic fabric of the building, as mentioned by the officer.
Privilege as well, then? That'd be that.
Excellent idea. Excellent.
Sorry.
Sorry, you're writing my list.
Heard everything you said, and from looking at everything you said and the way you said it, it feels like there's a slight change of direction on where we were, and that there's lots more potential now, I think, given what's going on around the country grant-wise. Is the ambition now sort of heading towards a sort of training development as opposed to someone coming in and taking it over? Because I'm feeling more of a lilt towards that in what you're saying, but your opening was that we're still open. So are you sort of heading more down one direction than the other now because of situations that have changed?
I think we want to make sure that what we put in front of you are all the options.
Okay.
So we kind of alluded
I'm
to
feeling
that.
you're in a direction, but I'm saying it, that's what I'm feeling.
I think the funding provides all kinds of opportunities.
Yeah.
One of the issues with landscape recovery is it sets 20 years of funding, and we don't know what it is at the moment. We don't know what it will fund. Some people are very clear it's going to be like countryside stewardship, and probably not much better. Others feel it may be different, and it is our development phase to come up with the ideas and effort to respond to those. So it seems not right to jump driver in front of that, but the pragmatic thing is to wait and see what that looks like.
We've looked at your strategy of skills, right, in several places on that strategy, which is the first time I've sort of seen it.
I think that's certainly in Pioneers, that's certainly in Exmoor Pioneers. We are encouraging DEFRA to think about skills in the landscape recovery scheme. And certainly at the steering group, I mean, I raised it at the steering group, and around the table there was a lot of support for that idea. We need the skills here to do the things we want to do with this landscape.
And it's quite a challenge keeping an open mind if you've heard all that as well.
Yes, and to bring all of it to you,
Correct.
so you've got options. Yes.
Yeah. Thank you.
Dominic.
Thank you. I'm just sorry to come back to this, but just because we mentioned challenging norms, and then in the next breath, basically then said we're not going to challenge a norm when it comes to our views towards heritage buildings. And I'm sorry to put you on the spot here, but we do need to, because that's ridiculous. The idea that we would keep a staircase in which is dangerous, not particularly functional, not pretty, not beautiful, not historic, just rubbish, simply because it's old, that's not us challenging norms. And it's like you said, it's not a listed building, we're going to treat it as that it is. You know, speaking of somebody who lives in a listed building, I urge you not to do that. So I think that, I know what you meant by it, in terms of treating it with respect and all the rest of it, particularly the outbuildings, which in many ways are a lot more interesting than the main house. And so I get that. But again, if we're going to approach this in terms of challenging norms and rethinking what respecting a heritage asset means, while still being able to have it as a living, working building, then that, I don't want to get into the detail, but we brought up the staircase. Ripping out the staircase and putting it, chopping up the firewood would be job one, I would say. The other thing is this issue of it's a community asset in a way. You kind of alluded to this. It's interesting because, of course, I just come back from Scotland, where I was having meetings with Community Land Scotland and thinking about what is a community asset. And in some cases, this, of course, would be a candidate to be wrapped into a community land trust. Now, that would be challenging for us, of course. In fact, we'd be giving the asset up in order to put it in a community land trust. But, of course, to have a community asset, and Jeremy knows more about this than anyone, you need to have a community to manage it and lead it and process it. And, of course, here that's difficult to do because of where it is and what would we define as that community. So for us, it's like the onus is on us to try and think about how we keep it as a community asset and connect it to community in some way. And I think you've thought a lot of that, actually, in terms of things like access and education and all of those things. And that, to me, is going to be the really interesting thing, which I think then comes up against exactly the thing you're doing, which is, well, how on earth can you compare this with any other model for a partnership plan? And it might be that the way to do it is to see it not so much a bit like, oh, it's a bit like a national trust farm that's got a tenant in it with certain requirements, but instead to say, well, if we looked at it as a community asset instead, then maybe looking at some community models, particularly in Scotland, might actually be more informative. But obviously always respecting that this is going to be different.
I think, I think, I don't want to get hung up on the staircase. There's a logistical issue that the space, you've got to get from there to there, and the space is only that long. So it is what it is, you know. That's why it's still there, I guess. So, I don't think it's about that. And I think certainly the brief for the feasibility on the traditional farm buildings is include adaptive reuse. You know, think completely outside the box. So it is absolutely not saying preserve them in aspect, just leave them as they are. It's saying just be open with it. So refute that, I think. In terms of, I agree completely about it. I mean, it has to have a public face. That's something we've always said. It's part of it's public land. It's not. So then you come back to what kind of operating model is it? Is it a community interest in that? And I think we've got to do it justice. I think we've got to put all of these things in front of you, and that's why we're not quite there yet. And the ones that are run on that sort of basis tend to be in places where there's a lot of footfall round about, so they tend to be close to big urban centres. I think of two examples, one outside Bath and one in the Cotswolds, so you get the picture. We couldn't be further away from this. So we're going to have to come up with what works there, I think.
Thank you. Robin, you're next.
Well, I've got a load of questions really, but I'll restrict myself a bit. Some great stuff going on, and good to see it's gradually developing. But it is quite gradual, and there's kind of a feeling looking at some of this, there's an awful lot of bits going on in direction. And are we absolutely certain that what's going on at the moment is going to contribute ultimately to what we want as the end vision? Because I'm looking at the sort of list in front of me, and it's kind of each bit is on its own bit at the moment, which you reiterated yourself to some extent, because you said, well, we can't really decide until we know about the landscape recovery and where that fits in. But if that doesn't come in 26, does that mean to say we're going to postpone it until it does, or it might do, or it might not? Have we got a sort of an end date where we'll need to know? Or can we keep kicking the can down the road until something becomes feasible or possible? There's that kind of feeling around that. There's only so far, I think, that you can go with the optimism that government will actually come up with something of a definite direction and some money to match it. The other bit around that, so there's kind of the timescale stuff. We've just got to be aware all the time that, we've had it for quite a little while. Yes, it's going to take a while to refurbish, but timescale is going to become increasingly important as we get further down the route and you start getting bits of it complete. You get the old buildings completed. None of the rest will come rapidly if going to go down the route of moving the other building. Well, as you're obviously aware, there'll be air quality problems, and it's going to be livestock in there. It's near SSSI and all that goes with it. Will we need a building? Do you want it to be run as a farm, or are we going to have a long term just using it as off grazing and let people wander in, use it and disappear again? How there's that kind of feeling. Does it become an entity of its own, even with multiple management in it, or does it just become something that we treat piecemeal? And historically, we haven't been that good at some of that, unfortunately, have we? It's kind of because you kind of set off with the best of intentions, and then things gradually slip. So there's some real challenges there. And then really, it's always when I see the word sustainability that I look at it and you think, give us a clue. What is actually sustainable? Does that mean it's sustainable in land management, or is it sustainable financially? Because maybe I've been here a long time, there's one or two of us have been here a long time as well, but haven't we heard that about sustainability mentioned around Pinkery a good many times over the years? And what that's ultimately meant is we've had to keep finding some money and put into it. And if this is going to be truly sustainable, we're no longer really in that position where you can keep finding additional funding from within to put out. It would need necessarily to be externally funded. So how sustainable is it, and how, that's going to be probably, to my mind, the biggest challenge, is to ensure sustainability of management if we're going to achieve the objectives that we've got there. And there's still, it is a huge opportunity, but it's not without risk. There's a few questions for you, Rob. That'll do. Okay.
Do you want me to get a few more people to speak, and then we'll... Absolutely. That might be best. There might be a theme, that's all I know. So next I've got Fran.
Thank you for that. It's a really interesting presentation. When I first joined the park, I heard about this place or something called Driver. I didn't really know quite what it was, but it sounded like an albatross around the park's neck. And I think then when we started to get the presentations about options, getting the park, getting it back, giving us some options, and it sounded so exciting, and I'm so glad that we went for it. However, then it started to feel like, oh, but we could be difficult with funding, and what are we going to do with it? And now it seems like it's coming back to be really exciting again because of what's happened in the past year and how you've managed to get and put in bids and get funding for it. And I think that's absolutely amazing. So I think rather than discuss too much what we can, what we can't do, I think we really do need to have those options presented to us thoroughly next year. And I think then we can go into the finer details of, I don't know, staircases, farms or training centres or whatever else, rather than going back to thinking we could do this, we could do that. I think we really need those options and then go into the detail of it rather than here today. But I think absolutely amazing, and I'm so glad that we retained it and that we're actually going to be able to have some kind of legacy for the Exmoor Park. And to be part of that, I think is really lovely. Thank you.
Thanks, Fran. Bill, you're next.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I'd like to see some financial projections. I mentioned it earlier on, so that we know where we are and where we're going. I know we don't know exactly which money or where the money is coming from, particularly with some of the schemes coming forward. But those uncertainties are also faced by commercial farmers as well, who are in the same position. So you just have to face them when you come to those challenges. A particular question was, will you be going for 10% woodland on Driver?
Thanks, Bill. Andrew, you're next. You don't need to ask that question.
Do you mean 10% more? Rob, thank you very much. Simplify it is obviously you've got so many variables going on and to balance them. And the funding, I guess the danger of funding, you can have an idea and you suddenly get funding over here. It can pull you away from your initial objectives, and I think there's a real danger of that. That you've got to have a clear objective, and actually the funding's in the wrong direction, say no to it, I think, up to a point. I'm glad we've gone away from chasing the partnership model. I'm not saying that sounds a bit fuzzy to me at the time, and I like the idea that you're starting at the top with the strategy and mapping that down. And I see that coming on down and having clear objectives we're trying to achieve. And then there's going to be some project, there's going to be some business as usual, and you can start to split that up in terms of roles, who you need to do it. And there's going to be some definite, you've got to have financial stability, operating stability, environmental stability. And that's, you'll get that right, and then find an operating model from that. But I think if you start an operating model, work back up again, that could be the wrong direction. So I like the idea you start at the top and coming down. Because it is remote, it's a challenge. To get that operational stability there, it's going to determine what you can do really, because it's not a case you pop out there for 5 minutes. That could, I think, influence the model going forward. So, no, I like the idea of starting at the top and carrying on doing that. To me, makes sense, and having that vision and breaking to objectives to come up with what's the right model going forward. So, well done, and I'll keep going on that. So, no questions there.
Thanks, Andrew. Christine.
Yeah, I just want to completely understand, are we looking now at long-term income over a period of 10, 15 years, or are we looking to cut and run and sell up and be finished? Have we actually made that final decision so that we know actually what our policy and plan is?
And I'm going to keep going. Okay. You just write yourself a list. Jeremy,
Thank you, Chairman. I think very well done to start with, so far. Very well done. It is a unique place, a very unique place, and therefore it's a very unique challenge. So my question was a bit in part of the last three, perhaps. And you're doing something already, so you're letting some grazing, you're making a little bit of money, you're using the landscape to achieve some financial return as well as all the good things. My question is, or my issue is, we need to keep that going and can you give us some more idea of how you will keep the place in order, use the landscape as it needs to be used, generate some income to get you to the place where you can bring it all together, which might be once the house is finished, which will be another year, won't it? So there's quite a bit of time before we can pull it together. I'm just concerned that we need to manage the time in the right way, financially and for the landscape. Does that make sense?
Yes, that's fine with Bill. Jeremy Holton and then Susan.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'm lucky enough to be on the steering group of the landscape recovery, and I have to tell you that it is a vast canvas, and there are so many things that have got to be sorted out. And what we're learning from that is that we have got to be patient, and that need for patience has to come here, and we won't be in a position to make the decisions that we want to make until, I think, towards the end of the 2-year period on the landscape recovery. However, what we are doing in the interim is exactly what we should be doing in the interim, because it's things that should be done anyway, and they don't affect how it will be dealt with at the end. You still have got the options that we considered last year. So my observation is, well done. We've been exceedingly lucky getting the funding. That's a real bonus, and it is an exciting project. But always remember the military adage that a plan made early is a plan made twice. And we have got to wait till we've got the variables before we make that final plan and decision.
Thank you. Very close to my favourite saying. Susan.
A couple of quick points. I really totally agree with Andrew about the whole form follows function thing, in terms of, don't decide it the other way round. But I was a bit, Andrew, what you said and what we presented, I wasn't quite sure that we are moving away from the partnership thing. Because Andrew, I thought I got the sense from what Andrew was saying, I might be wrong, that you were saying that's great, we're not doing form after function, we're actually we're taking a step back and going that way, which I totally support. But also I felt in the presentation that we are still pursuing that partnership route, so some clarification about that, and maybe that still needs to be evolved. Notwithstanding all the, we can't run before we can walk, and there's all the funding issues and stuff like that, I suppose I remember being in previous meetings about Driver where members who live or next door close to Exmoor, and I am, and particularly Wens with connections or part of the farming community, have been concerned, about what we're doing with the land, So in terms of comms coming forward, it would be helpful to get a bit more of a sense, not necessarily now, but to be reassured about how we're going to tackle that. Because I remember that being a big issue for quite a number of members over the last 18 months. And I was just, because I'm now wondering, okay, well, how do we... I totally understand why we are where we are, and it's really important that we do this in the right way. And it's a big... People are wondering what we're doing, and I'm wondering how... I don't live here, so I don't have quite the same networks and sense of it that others will, but I was just wondering about how we play that and what the general chat is from us, the landowning community and local communities generally, about what's happening. Thank you.
Robin, that's the end of it. So you can now ask all those questions.
Okay, I'll do my best. I think there's something that cuts through a number of them, which is that the way I see it is that the funding that's been secured are the building blocks we need. Everything we're doing are things we needed to progress. So why are we doing the East Barn? Well, it was collapsing and we had a grant. That's why we did it. We could have done it in 3 years' time, but we would have had to fund it from core. So we've done it in this order because funding is available. So in a sense, what you see through the year behind us, as it were, 2024, is works that we've been able to, or getting the building blocks in place in terms of funding, but also spending the money on the things we needed to do because funding was available. So FIP was a good example of that. So I don't think anything is wasted. It may seem like
it's not all brought together, but that's the nature of where the funding is coming from. So, and then if you look forward into 2025, the Pioneers funding that we worked really hard to get is going to start delivering projects on the ground, nature projects. So that is the plan. You know, we will be progressing nature projects. We will be progressing tree planting there, wood pasture, sow the seeds, because we've secured the funding. So those are the building blocks without which we can't go forward. So I think that's my underlying take on it. So the fact that Robin was saying that there are bits going on, I use that phrase, Robin, and we need to grasp the nettle. I think we are grasping the nettle. There are, certainly with the modern building, it is end of life. I mean, it's collapsing. We could spend quite a lot of money keeping it up, and we have decided we're not going to do that, so we're going to take it down in 2025, at the beginning of 2025. And that presents all kinds of issues for us in terms of there won't be any structure up there that we can use for storage, implements, whatever we're doing. And we know all the issues in terms of planning and scale and everything else, so we're very mindful of that. But we don't really have an option on the old building. It's had it, so it's got to go.
Just a comment. Don't forget that if you take it down, you lose your planning footprint, but you could use that planning footprint somewhere else before you take it down. You've got to get through planning first.
One of the things that we talk about a lot in projects is planning. You'd be surprised to hear. Planning compliance of everything we do up there. We have to be absolutely right, and anything we bring to you in the future in terms of when we get into talking about partners and the kinds of things we might want to be doing up there, or partners might want to do up there, a planning compliance test is going to be pretty high up the agenda in terms of assessing ideas. We're not going to go anywhere near this if it's right. Sustainability, I think, is of land management, Robin. It's doing things up there that are sustainable into the future. I mean, in a sense, Pinkery, we put money into it annually, but it's a sustainable model. It works really well, but we have a level of support of it. Driver may be on a different basis, and we've said it would wash its own face. But I would say Pinkery is a sustainable model. It does what it does very well. There's always room for improvement, but it's a sustainable model. I invite Bill to come and have a look, and we'll talk about wood pasture and things at Driver. I'm sure we can get him for 10%. That's not a stretch. And for Christine, we made the decision, Christine, last December that the asset would be retained, and that was your decision in the committee this time last year. So that's the position we're in until that's revisited. Yeah.
We haven't changed that.
We haven't changed that. No.
Okay.
No. Right. A number of people have come back to the word partnership, and of course the word partnership embraces a whole series of different options and ideas, and I think that's what we want to explore with you in the first half of 2025. We want to do a bit more research about comparators and what we mean by partnership. We're in active conversations with various organisations at the moment, and I don't want to say any more than that because this is a recorded meeting. But we want to be able to bring you something that is give you a series of wide-ranging options and ideas, if you like. And it won't be a paper. I think we'll bring it to you as a discussion, so as a workshop, so we can go around that. We think we've given ourselves enough time, if it's going to be March, something like that, with a paper in May. That's my time frame. I hesitate to commit myself, but I think that's probably what it will be. And still in the knowledge that we've actually got time. We're not in a rush on this. And I urge you to go back. The risk assessment we did, it is very clear this is the riskiest part of it. It's not about funding, it's not about reputation, or they all link together, but getting the partnership right and what that looks like from our point of view and from the partner's point of view, or a series of partners up there, is the critical bit. And if that goes wrong, then it's certain as eggs is eggs that the rest of it will go wrong. So we've got to get it right, which is why we're not talking about it today in any more than principle.
So we've been asked to note the progress, but I think we need to note and thank everybody that's involved in that work that's gone to this. And we look forward to further reports coming forward. So thank you very much, Rob. Moving on, the next item is item 14, which is consultation enabling remote attendance and proxy voting at local authority meetings, which of course includes us. And I'm not going to propose that we go through this report, because it will come to a lot of authorities as well. What I'm going to suggest is, if you've got any comments that you want the Chief Executive and I to put into the consultation response, can you email them by the 13th of December, which is actually Friday the 13th. We'll probably best do it on the day before, which won't be the 13th. But I think we all know where we are. We've all tried remote potential meetings, so unless there's anybody got anything burning they wish to say in a public meeting. Fran?
Do we have to vote on this then to support the fact that, because it's recommended that we do support it, so should we not be voting on this?
We can do that, yeah, but I think any comments,
okay,
just email them over. Because you've got to fill in the consultation.
Okay,
Right.
yeah, because
There is something I would like to say in open forum, which is that I'm very uncomfortable about the idea of the proxy voting, because we're supposed to hear the debate before we vote. So I think I would not wish to support proxy voting.
Is that what you're
I think proxy voting was my issue, and I've already completed a consultation on this elsewhere.
Right, so the Chief Executive just suggested that we have a vote on the on one, which is the proposal to introduce the powers, and whether we want to go with that.
Yeah.
So,
Chairman, don't we already have that?
No. No.
What's the difference in intending and looking on?
We can't.
You can't. Not listening. No.
We can. Well, we
can't vote.
We can't vote. We could physically be here.
Which is what it's saying.
No, we're not really attending. We're observing. Yeah.
So, members, you'll remember during COVID, we had the special ability to be able to work from home, work remotely. That was removed, and a lot of people felt it was actually really helpful to be able to do that for all sorts of reasons. If you've got caring responsibilities, if you've broken your leg, you can't drive, all sorts of reasons. So the current government has now got this consultation out which is suggesting that we bring that back in. There's a whole load of detailed questions which I don't think are that relevant about, you know, whether you'd want to say it was more than 50% or this, that and the other. What I'd really appreciate is a steer on, one, are we happy that we want to support the hybrid model so that we do allow members to attend the meeting and vote from home? And secondly, I'm not very happy, like you, on the proxy voting, and so my recommendation would be to not support the proxy voting. So if we could just have a quick vote on those two, and any other comments that you have that you feel strongly about, send them through to me by next Friday. But also, it's an open consultation. Anyone can go on and fill it in, so you can all do it individually if you would like to.
Do you need a proposer?
Yes. Thank you very much. Can we have a second, Stephanie? Thank you.
Can I ask one more question?
No, I'm just going to say something in a moment, please. Let me just check the other members. I just want to say that
one.
we have a member that could have joined today, but couldn't come because of caring responsibilities. And this is just the sort of occasion where that would have been useful for the member to be able to take part. And I think that the proxy voting goes out the window once you can attend remotely. I mean, unless you're on your deathbed, I suppose, but then presumably your mind would be on more important things. So that's where I think one cancels out the other anyway. Exactly. So I think it's helping the fact that the demographic has changed, that we all, there aren't loads of people sat at home, mothers that used to stay at home could take over and do a bit of caring of elderly relatives so other people go out. There aren't this body of volunteers anymore, and we are all trying to juggle about 3 dozen different plates, including me as my husband's man flu, but he's the man flu. Right, so I'm going to Before I come back to you, Francis, can I just check nobody over here hasn't spoken already? Wants to speak?
Just
Bill?
so we're voting on the principle of allowing remote attendance.
Yes.
That's the first thing we're voting.
Yes.
Which includes voting.
Yes. While you're on the screen, like we did in COVID. So if you remember, and we were completely all remote then, weren't we? But we could, and you know.
It's got to be that.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you get to hold.
Francis.
Just checking that this is about answering consultation on having the power, not a requirement.
No,
That it's before that we would be making decisions for ourselves for what we wanted to do. Yeah.
And obviously, if you feel really strongly, do have a go at the consultation yourself, which is on.
Yeah.
Right, we'll take that one first then. We have a proposal and second. All those in favour? Oh, sorry.
I was voting.
You're voting. Oh, sorry. Every prompts me. That is unanimous, Carol. Thank you.
No, sorry, I'm against.
Oh, right, you're against. Sorry, we have one against, Carol. Right, moving on to the proxy voting. Can I have a proposer then? Thanks, Mandy. That we are not going to. We're not going to.
Subject to,
Was our second.
subject to Sarah's amendment, clarifying that point.
Yes. So, are you seconding, Francis?
Seconding not.
Not, yeah. Not support that. Opposing.
Are we proposing an amendment or just something?
No, it's just voting it down.
Just voting it down.
You can't vote against. Vote against, yeah.
I think the recommendation is that the authority does not support proxy voting.
All those in favour?
Right, all those in favour? Thank you, Mark.
Does it need to be proposed and then seconded?
It has been.
That has been.
Yeah. I've just told them it has been. Right, all those in favour of not supporting proxy voting? Thank you. Right, and then any further comments you might have by the 13th of December, week on Friday, I believe. Bill, do you want to say anything else?
No, I just don't agree with that it's a good thing remote meeting. I'd rather pay somebody for care for the child or the parents so that they can come and speak. And I just find, when I've chaired hybrid meetings, and it's very difficult, and some people don't contribute like they would if they were in the room. So I just think it's not really. I mean, in COVID it was different, but as a rule, I wouldn't support it.
Yeah, and I would say I've sometimes done triple remotely because I'm working full time, it's hard to fit in, we share a car, so if I can't leave the car, I can't get there, something happens, there's lots of reasons, unreasonable reasons, and it's worked really well the last two where we've had to, it zooms in to the person speaking, so I can, and we vote, and the was quite full on.
Technology's got better as well.
And so I would like to be really positive.
Yeah, I have to say some meetings that I do that are now fully remote, and to be honest, I think it's, I think we'll get used to as much as anything else. Robin, last
just a question actually. We've obviously
hang on.
I can shake my head enough, it'll probably. I've got one in front of me, I'll pick it up. We've obviously dealt with 2 and 3, but have we then dealt with 2 of the recommendations to delegate to the Chief Executive the power to deal with it? That's all I was asking. I didn't hear that within either of those 2. If not, then I'd propose that was there as well.
Right, type it all up then. So the second one is delegate to the Chief Executive in consultation with the Chairperson and Deputy Chairperson submission of Exmoor National Park Authority consultation response. Robin's proposed, mine is second. All those in favour? Thank you. Right, moving on to item 15. Oh, yes. Team Devon Joint Committee. Oh dear. Could be complicated. No, don't go there, please. Anybody wants to go to the meeting tomorrow afternoon, they're very much welcome to it. Right, so, the reason we've got this, you're going to be doing this, not me. That's because you set aside voting earlier.
Sorry.
You're proposing things.
So, final item. So Devon has set up a new joint committee, Team Devon. We've been invited to join it along with Dartmoor and all of the other authorities in Devon. We have accepted that, subject to you approving it today. So there is no cost that we can see so far, and it is anticipated that the chair would attend. However, you can see in the recommendation we've got a slight complication. So at the moment, the chair is appointed to attend with the deputy chair as the substitute. Okay. Our standing orders actually say it's that the chair with the substitute being a Secretary of State. Is that correct? Okay. So what I'm asking you to do is to make sure that you are happy that we stay with, as we are, the departure and standing orders as set out in the annual meeting, that it's the chair with the substitute being the deputy chair. Okay, so the first recommendation is that you're happy that we participate in Team Devon, and the second, that we stay with the chair and the deputy chair, but you may want to have a debate on that. Thank you.
Well, that sums it all up.
Happy to propose.
Thank you. Any discussion?
Yeah.
Dominic?
No, only very quickly, because do we know why? Was there any reason why it specified a Secretary of State member to be the replacement? Was there any reason that, for instance, it was because they wanted to introduce somebody who was not going to be part of any county council or district council? Was that it? I mean, are we messing with someone we shouldn't be messing with? Is what I'm saying.
It's us. It's not them. It's them. Sorry.
Yeah.
It's awful, isn't it? Them and us. You've got something. Let me say this as well. It is our standing.
This is something we wrote, but we just don't know why we wrote it, so we want to change it.
Andrew might. No.
So our standing orders say that any committee, subcommittee or joint committee should have a member, a local authority member and a member appointed by the Secretary of State. That's just Exmoor National Park standing orders. And for Team Devon, at the moment it's been it was an oversight that the Team Devon, which was an informal meeting, the chairman, and then went along, and the deputy was a substitute, because it didn't really fall under standing orders because it was an informal meeting. Now it's been formalised because of the combined authority that's been created in Devon. That does fall under the standing orders, and our standing orders say so. This is Andrew's already there, so this is just.
That was really helpful. No, to be honest, I started questioning myself why I was there.
Just if we do review our standing orders next time, there might need to be a little tweak on that to cover such circumstances.
For other joint committees, it may be that there are 2 slots, but just it so happens that for Team Devon there's 1 slot for Exmoor, one for Dartmoor and 1 for the others.
So you could put in standing orders in the event that there's only one, and this is what we'll do. Just
yeah.
I can't remember if we voted or not.
No.
Oh, right.
We proposed and seconded.
Right, all those in favour? Lovely, thank you. Until I get to a certain... Oh, thank you. I'm not sure about that. Should we rub it more often? You haven't actually been to one yet. I might do that. I might be ill. Before they bring in the you can attend remotely, I might be ill one day. Personnel update. So we've got some starters. Welcome to Bex and Kate. And with some leavers. So wish the very best of luck to Anne and Philip and Shelley and Lee and Tracy, and thank them for their work here. Item 17, members' reports. Nobody's actually told me they've got anything they want to say. No? It's been a quiet month. And I have no other business of urgency except don't all quickly pack your things away because something else is going to happen. So I'd like to end this meeting. Thank you.